Hello friends, welcome to Universe of Naruto X. If you love Naruto what if stories and anime explanations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin today's story. What if Na was kidnapped as a child and Ino changed his broken destiny forever? Na sat on the log in the center of Training Ground 7. A brown king cobra was hissing angrily from the other log next to him. I know it's my fault the scroll isn't in your possession right now. I take full responsibility for Mizuki's incompetence. Na said as the cobra hissed some more. The blonde nodded his head and inwardly groaned in annoyance. I agree. I'll wait a week before. The blonde was cut off as the cobra sharply hissed. Naruto's fist clenched against the wood before he nodded his head. Understood. You'll have it by the end of the day, he said as a thin trail of smoke left his eyes and blended into the air. Wait, he quickly exclaimed, stopping the cobra from dispelling itself and losing the link it held with Orochimaru. Seeing that he was successful in keeping the linked snake in front of him, the blonde quickly pushed himself off the log. Did you make any progress with the request I made? I know it's only a matter of time before the Hyuga find out about my gift, Na said, his senses telling him that one was a go. Odd 500 yards away, watching him and slowly getting closer. The blonde made sure his back was to the intruder. Even though they could easily see him, they couldn't see his moving lips. The Hyuga clan was very adept at reading lips, and he didn't want them to know what he was saying. The cobra was quiet for a minute or two. No doubt Orochimaru, thinking back to his research. Another minute went by before hissing reached the blonde's ears. Naruto's smile grew bigger and bigger with more that was said. Of course, that could work. You're right, it hasn't failed me yet. I'll begin the process as soon as I could, Na said, bowing to the king cobra as he dispelled. Did you hear that, Yoko? It is possible to merge both sets of eyes, Naruto thought happily. Sorry, Naruto-kun, but I don't understand or speak snake. It's impossible for foxes or any other species, excluding a few special humans. Just tell me about it later. I still need my beauty sleep, Yoko said with a yawn to prove her point. Na audibly groaned and crossed his arms. What a load of baloney. You're already beautiful. You don't need sleep, he complained out loud as his senses went off. He spun quickly, simultaneously unsealing ebony. As he made his 180 degrees turn, he skillfully batted away all three of the shuriken thrown at him. He glared daggers at the white-eyed Hyuga glaring back at him. He was immediately surprised to find it was Hinata. What the hell are you doing here? Don't you know it's nearly 7 in the morning? Na asked, holding his black blade in a reverse grip. You know why I'm here. It's illegal for the Bakugan to be in the sockets of an outsider. I'm here for the sole purpose of ripping out those eyes and having them destroyed immediately, the blue-haired girl said with anger and conviction in her tone. The blonde's mouth dropped in surprise, not by her words, but by how she said them. He didn't know Hinata could speak the way she did. He remembered a few weeks before he was taken, albeit barely, but he knew she was incredibly soft-spoken then. She was barely able to even wave at him when he saw her in the playground. It was the first and last time he seen her before his return 2 years ago. Truly, time changes everybody. I'm sorry, but I don't know what you're talking about. Last time I checked, my eyes were blue, he said, even going so far as to point at them with his finger. Now, I know your eyes are white, but you really can't be blind, he said before she clenched her teeth in anger and ran towards him. His lips twitched in annoyance and he quickly shifted to the left, watching as the log gained a large dent because of her angered strike. Wow, the Juken is really strong. The stories about the Hyuga clan are definitely true. He goyed as he continued to dodge every strike she sent his way. Blocking was out of the question since she could still cause damage from the inside. Could you quit it, Hinata-san, before things get serious? Na said, not wanting to hurt the young Hyuga. After all, she was the Aries, and her injury could easily create a fiasco he didn't want to cause. But it was more because she looked incredibly cute when she was angry. Her Bakugan flared to life in anger, her veins pulsing in her immense anger. No, you must pay for your transgressions. Only then will I have peace, she angrily yelled before Na moved and grabbed each of her wrists. He stepped into her guard and quickly kicked her feet from under her. She landed on her back with Naruto straddling her. Sorry, Hinata-san, but you're wrong. I don't have to pay for anything because I haven't committed any crime against your clan. Now, Kabuto, He's the guy you want, Na thought in amusement. You're a lying fox and you know it, she yelled, causing Naruto's eyes to widen a bit. That's right, I know about your little secret, and if you don't want me to tell Ino, then I suggest you tell me the truth. The Hyuga Aries said as the blonde closed his eyes. Na nodded his head as he opened his eyes and looked Hinata right in hers. You're right, Hinata, I have committed a crime. I have stolen from you in your clan, and I'm sorry, Na said as he stood to his feet. The brunette quickly stood to her feet and glared at the blonde. Told you. Now return what was stolen and I'll see if I can get you a pardon from my father, she said while dropping into a defensive stance just in case the blonde went back on his word. Understood. Naruto droned as he dug into his pouch and rummaged around it for a few seconds. A few more seconds went by before he pulled out a pair of blue cotton panties. I stole these from you. I'm sorry. Forgive me, Naruto said with a smirk. Hinata her head as she stared at her undergarments. She narrowed her eyes before quickly widened them in surprise. How do you? She stuttered as a blush appeared on her face. Am I forgiven? Na asked while he twirled the panties on a single finger. Her blush deepened and her eyes hardened again. She quickly thrust her palm forward and a wall of wind quickly launched him backwards. He skidded along the ground as he held his chest. You perverted liar. I know you have the Bakugan, and I'm going to check everywhere on your body for them. I know all about the seals on your body, she said with her Bakugan eyes flaring in anger. But not today, Na said before spitting out a glob of blood as Yoko quickly healed up his right lung. My teammates are nearing and you and I both know this doesn't involve them. Plus, I would love to see you again, Na said as he watched the girl back into the surrounding trees. As of right now, you and I have unfinished business, she said before turning and running, her panties clutched in her hands. The blonde coughed again and stood to his feet. Phew, that was fun, he muttered as he stepped into his small pile of blood and smothered it into the ground. You should really thank me for not going to sleep on you. I was nearly there, Yoko barked at him in anger. I can't believe you couldn't dodge that. Even I knew what was coming, she added as Sasaki and Sakura dragged themselves into the clearing, clearly still half asleep. You guys look dead, he muttered as they sleepily made their way to a tree before leaning and sliding down it. Screw you, Blondie, Sasaki murmured as he drifted back to sleep. The pink-haired girl didn't have a thing to say as she was asleep as soon as she leaned against the tree. Wow, you guys are not early birds. Naruto scoffed as he went back to the 3 logs in the middle of the field. He stared at the middle log, it being the one struck by Hinata minutes ago. He brushed his fingers over the dent and nodded his head a little. I'll see you again, Hinata Hyuga, he thought as he turned and sat against the log. Now, I wonder how long we have to wait for Kakashi, he asked himself as he leaned his head against the log and closed his eyes. Seconds later, 2 orbs of smoke seeped through his lids, causing him to sigh contentedly with a smile on his face. Hokage Tower, Saratobi trudged his way into his office, a cup of coffee in his hands. Normally, he would have called for it to be delivered into his office, but he hadn't poured himself a cup of coffee in 3 decades. Plus, he needed to stretch his legs. He's been catching up on paperwork the entire night, and he needed to move around. This whole thing with Mizuki was really giving him a run for his money. He racked his brain for possible solutions, but none of his shinobi had the abilities to create black smoke that could thin out into colorless air. Also, with how it was used, had to make that person very talented. He took a long sip of coffee and placed it on his table. He sat down and leaned into his chair. He's been dead too long, so Inoki wasn't able to get anything as to why he did what he did. Only the event was found. The Hokage thought as he picked up a piece of paper. He narrowed his eyes as he read the paper. It was an official request from the Hyuga clan to launch a full investigation against Na. How could Na have the Bakugan? His eyes are clearly blue. He thought out loud as he grabbed his large denied stamp. He only picked it up and just continued to stare at the paper. From the sounds of it, they had legitimate reasons. Naru has been sensed with a strong genjutsu laced around his eyes. Anu had also noticed him hopping from roof to roof during the past year with a white band covering his eyes. Also, every other week, he's been seen sitting on his father's nose on the Hokage mountain. If the blonde had the Bakugan, his actions would be just enough proof to launch an investigation aga. Inst him. He set the stamp down on his desk and leaned back against his chair. Damn it. Nah. I thought you were turning over a new leaf. I'll talk to him first before I allow the Haug into his home. The Hokage thought before putting the document into his desk before he looked over other documents. After an hour went by, his lips twitched into a small smile. About time you returned. I was sure you would have been here years ago. Saratobi said. His loud groan was heard. Sorry for my absence, but I've been dealing with a certain someone, Jiraiya said, entering the office from the window. I got here as soon as I realized what he was doing. He added, as he sat on the windowsill, his body inside the office. I would have sent another message telling you to forget about Orochimaru, but you went under our radar as well. I knew what Orochimaru would do. I taught him everything he knows, the Sandaime said, keeping his eyes on his paperwork. Not everything, Jiraiya muttered before Hirozen snapped his eyes straight at him. Not the way I meant it, he immediately said, raising his hands. Hai's gaze lightened as he put his pen down. So tell me, how did my lost student keep you busy these past 2.5 years? The white-haired male jumped slightly before he began scratching his cheek in embarrassment. That's not important, he said between weak chuckles. What about Naruto? Where's he at? I would love to see him. He asked with a smile. Hai slowly nodded his head. I see you didn't get that message. You really should inscribe a toad summoning into this desk for future problems. How else am I supposed to keep you informed on this front? He expressed his discomfort as he leaned back into his chair for the third time since he returned to his office. What do you mean? What happened to him? The concerned godfather asked, pushing off the wall in his worry. Training ground 7. Na cracked his eyes open and immediately grabbed someone's waist. Sakura, what are you doing? He asked, noticing her body straddling his own. He pushed her off and promptly stood to his feet. Well, she stuttered with a blush on her cheeks. She sighed and blushed even deeper. Keep your attraction directed at Sasaki. I have no interest in someone so pitifully weak as you, Naruto coldly said as he hopped onto the log he was previously aiming against. Tears of anger welled up in the Haruno's eyes. But before she could lash out, Kakashi appeared in a cloud of smoke. Now, Naruto-kun, that isn't the way to treat a comrade. The masked Jonin said while wagging a finger at the blonde. Said blonde scoffed a glare in the John's direction. I'll stop as soon as she proves herself in my eyes. Not a single second before, Naruto said from his wooden pedestal. Sasaki walked up to the group with an uninterested expression. Could we just get to this real genin test for once? I agree with the drama queen. Na said, ignoring the boy's glare. Kakashi watched the interactions and inwardly sighed. It looks like I'm failing another team. The council isn't going to like this. Kakashi thought, closing his only visible eye for a while. Kakashi, the test, Naruto barked in annoyance. Of course, Kakashi said, opening his eye. The test is a simple one. I have 2 of these bells. The test is for you to take a bell from me. Kakashi explained. Naruto sighed and retreated inside his mind. He knew from Orochimaru where Kakashi got the idea from. His father got it from his sensei, Jiraiya. Jiraiya got it from the Sandaime. This is like a 5th generation test. Seriously, these people need some new ideas. Yoko complained in annoyance. I know what you mean. Na thought, watching as Kakashi put a clock on a log. If teamwork is the only thing needed to complete this test, then I know what to do. It's a little too early, but it might be better. Na thought as Kakashi started the test. The blonde and the Jonin were left in the middle of the field. I wasn't paying attention to everything, but I think I heard you say come at you with the intent to kill. Na said, gazing right into Kakashi's single eye. Did you say that, Kakashi? The silver-haired John and I smiled and nodded his head. Yes, I did. Don't worry about my safety, Naruto-kun. I can take care of myself, he said, giving the blonde a thumbs up. The snake user smirked as his pupils seemed to slit vertically. A reddish tint appeared in his eyes as he began to chuckle heavily. I'll remember those words, Kakashi, the blonde said as he sunk into the ground. Okay, I'll be waiting. Remember, you have until noon to get a bell and stay on the team. Kakashi exclaimed, knowing the blonde went somewhere in the surrounding forest. 4 hours to do a test. Should I have shortened the time or should I have waited longer? Kakashi mused to himself as he pulled out an orange book and began casually reading it. XXXL and FXX. An hour passed by with no activity, making Kakashi close his book in confusion. He was sure he sensed Sasaki about to attack him about 20 minutes ago, but nothing happened. He definitely heard Sakura's yells for a few seconds before they were quieted. What was even stranger, he couldn't sense either of their chakras. Okay, weird, but not my problem. If they want to waste their time, then I'm not going to stop them. Kakashi muttered as he reopened his book. XXXL and FXX. In the forest, Naruto stood in front of his teammates. Sasaki was glaring at him with his obsidian eyes. The blonde slapped him with a seal some time ago that completely sealed his chakra. Sakura was near and quickly tried to scream before she was hit with 2 seals. One for her own chakra and another for her mouth. Both of them had the blonde's bandages wrapped around them, tight enough to keep them from moving, but loose enough so that their bones didn't crack with the pressure. Are you two still mad at me? The blonde asked with crossed arms and a tapping foot. What do you think, Blondie? Sasaki fired back, being the only one capable of speech. You're lucky I can't use my sharing. The blonde's lip twitched in a smirk. That's right. How are you coming along with that bloodline I gifted you last year? Do you have all 3 Thomas yet? The blonde asked, already knowing the answer. The Uchiha's glare increased if that was possible. Gifted. You didn't give this bloodline to me as a gift. I was born with it. I unlocked it because I'm an elite of the Uchiha. The raven-haired Uchiha sneered at the smirking blonde. The Uzumaki smirk turned into a smile. Oh. Of course. But do you realize that me showing you your own death served as the catalyst to unlock those eyes of yours? So really, in truth, I really did give them to you as a gift. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to consider yourself an elite, the blonde said, watching as Sasuke's eyes widened a little before narrowing again. The blonde turned his gaze to Sakura and narrowed his eyes. I don't believe you would really prove useful in the plan I have concocted in my brain. But even you must know the true purpose of this test. Na said as her angry emerald eyes widened in realization. The blonde walked up to her and held up his hand. If you promise not to yell and reveal our position, I'll remove the seal on your mouth. Nod. If you promise, the blonde sternly spoke as she quickly nodded. Tell Sasaki what the true nature of this test is. He ordered as she nodded and turned to look at a glaring Sasaki. It's teamwork. The test isn't a process of elimination to determine which of us get to become genin. It's to see if we can work together to achieve an assignment. I thought it was a little fishy earlier, but now in this situation, I've had time to properly think. Sakura informs softly, glaring at Na. Thanks to Naruto, she swooned, causing the blonde to shake his head. Indeed, Sasaki, you see, I'm not such a bad guy. I'm actually the guy you should really listen to. I don't want to hamper the growth of your skills, but increase them. After all, you need a lot of power if you want to kill your brother, Na said as the Uchiha's glare increased exponentially at the mention of his brother. What do you know about him? Where is he? He yelled out his questions, making the blonde sigh. I know all I need to know about Itachi Chiha, which is a lot. As to his current location, no idea. I'm not sure you even heard my other words, Naruto said, crossing his arms. Sasaki, just agree with him. You don't have to like it, but you can't deny the truth in his words. You're at your level of strength because of Na. You may not see it, but it's obvious you think of Na as your rival. So, stop being so thick-headed and listen to him. Sakura nearly yelled in annoyance. Both of the boys widened their eyes at her words. Wow, Pinky, you just might prove me wrong. Keep up the change, Naruto said as hearts appeared in her eyes at his praise. So, how about it, Sasuke-san? The blonde asked with a smirk. The Uchiha stayed silent for 2 whole minutes before releasing a sigh of defeat. I guess, he muttered. I hope you realize I let you get the drop on me earlier, he said with a smirk. Na grinned brightly as he chuckled. Of course you did, Sasuke-san. Na said as he walked between them and yanked his bandages free of them both. They quickly spun in circles as the bandages turned to smoke and rue wrapped around the blonde's entire arms. When they solidified, the spinning duo came to a stumbling stop. Excellent progress, you two. Now let's get this plan in your brains as well, the blonde said with a grin as he crouched with a stick in hand. 20 minutes before noon, Kakashi yawned in boredom. He had been standing in the same spot for the past few hours with little activity happening at all. He had debated on searching the forest for them, but his book was too interesting. But now that he's finished, nothing was really stopping him. I could reread the book, he muttered with a giggle before he sensed a pair of fluxes in chakra. Immediately, he knew they were his team getting their chakras back. Scratch that, the Jonin thought as he prepared himself. At the next second, Kana and Shuriken rocketed out of the surrounding foliage from 3 different sides. He took out his own kanai and continued to simply bat away the approaching projectiles. He jumped in surprise when they all transformed into his blonde student. They grinned at his airborne figure as a fireball came speeding at him from below. He widened his eye and created his own clone and used it as a foothold to get out of the way. Pretty good, he said as his feet touched the ground. He continued to dodge all of the thrown kana with ease. Some were thrown short and others were overthrown. He didn't know if it was purposely or on accident since they continued to transform into clones of his blonde student. Sasaki joined the fray as the hundreds of blondes around him distracted him with hand-to hand. As he continued to dispel the surprisingly weak shadow clones, a dozen small fireballs hurtled his way. They burned through the clones with ease and continued heading his way. He widened his eyes. These fireballs were way too large to have come from Sasaki. He quickly raised his headband, revealing his sharing, and that made things easier to understand. With the help of his sharing, he saw that the SAS was actually a transformed Na. Though at that moment, all of the clones exploded in a cloud of smoke, hampering his vision. His senses went off and he bent his hips, narrowly avoiding the swiping hand of one of his students. Nice work with the cloud of smoke, Naruto-kun, Kakashi said as Sasaki quickly appeared in front of him, a pair of kanai in his hands. The Jonin quickly weaved through the Uchiha's attacks, knowing he was mostly trying to cut the string attached to the bells. His sharing was activated, but his own sharing was far greater than the Uchiha's. He quickly kicked the Uchiha aside, knowing he was preparing to throw a kanai at the bell. If he had, they would have surely been removed from his hips. He clapped his hands, sending a pulse of chakra outward and clearing out the smoke from around him. Ringing was heard around the entire field, causing the Jonin to smile wide. Looks like you 3 were too late to get your bells. Better luck next year, he said as he walked towards the logs to collect his clock. I wouldn't be so sure about that, Naruto said from his sitting position on the middle log. Sakura was sitting on the left log. Sasaki was leaning against the right, the silent clock in his hand before it was dropped to the floor. The blonde had both of the bells dangling from his left hand. How do you get the bells? They're clearly still on my hip, he said, looking down to see another pair of bells. His implanted sharing picked up chakra in the bells. He was surprised when they transformed into a pair of blondes before dispelling altogether. One of those kana was thrown by you. Those 2 clones flawlessly substituted themselves for my bells, Kakashi stated as he dropped his headband back over his eye. Correct. I knew that if I was to throw all of the kani, you would check your hip every time a kanai passed by. So, I had Sakura throw them. You knew this and thus didn't bother checking, knowing how poor she was at throwing. My clones appeared and kicked up a lot of fuss, further distracting you from the possibility of losing your bells. Sasaki made a beautiful entrance inside the smoke. His job was to continue going after the bells, already knowing they were fake. You fell for the ruse without a second thought, Na said with a grin. So, Sensei, how'd we do? Sakura asked with a hopeful tone. That plan took a lot of timing and cooperation from all of you. The execution was also very surprising considering I believed you 3 would never see each other eye to eye, Kakashi said, giving the 3 an eye smile. The meaning of this exercise was for us to work together. Since we completed the objective, that means we passed our gen exam. Sasaki spoke up with an aloof tone and a cross of his arms. You're right, Sasaki. You 3 can have your lunch, Kakashi said, pointing a thumb at the 3 bentos placed on stone. Thank you. I'm starving, Sakura uncharacteristically exclaimed, pushing herself off the wooden pillar. Sasaki, albeit with the same appreciation, chose to simply walk silently towards his food. The blonde kept his eye on the scarecrow and grinned. I might not have came at you with the intent to kill this morning, but from now on, I'll keep you on your toes. Na grinned before he pushed off and joined his teammates in eating lunch. As long as you don't do anything treasonous, I won't have to kill you. Kakashi's eyes smiled with a hushed tone. Only Naruto could hear. Okay, you three, you have the rest of the day off. Meet back here tomorrow morning for training as Team 7. Kakashi said before body flickering in a leaf whirlwind. The blonde stood with a bento in his hand. As he slowly ate it, his senses picked up a slight disturbance in the air. He couldn't put a finger on the location, but the feeling of anger and shame was obvious to him. I might as well get this over with. The blonde thought with an inward sigh. I'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll continue to function as a perfect team. Na said while walking away, still chewing his food. 5 minutes passed by before the blonde saw a large white-haired man. At first sight, he knew exactly who the man was. He stood frozen in his spot, the chopsticks falling from his numb fingers. Holy, Yoko muttered, seeing the sen standing in the middle of the trees. Hello, Naruto-kun, judging by your posture and expression. You know full well who I am. Jiraiya of the Sonnen spoke with conflicted emotions in his eyes. He was angry at the young blonde for willingly accepting Orochimaru's apprenticeship, but he was also filled with shame because he wasn't exactly there to protect the blonde. Naruto slowly nodded his head. Out of the other two Sonnen, Jiraiya was the one he never wanted to encounter. The best thing for him to do was to avoid creating any more hostility from the Toad Sage. I do your Jiraiya of the Sannin, teammate Tsunade and Orochimaru and student to Hirozen, the Sandame Ho. Kag, leader of Konoha spy organization. Surely a pleasure to meet a legend such as yourself, Naruto said, bowing respectfully to the man. Jiraiya closed his eyes and hung his head. I guess it's true then. You became an apprentice to Orochimaru, this village's most infamous criminal. He said softly, no longer able to keep himself in denial. The blonde audibly gulped. He really had to tread softly. There was two ways to go about this meeting. He could either prey on the man's shame or his anger. This is your territory, Yoko. Work your magic, Na thought as the woman quickly coached the blonde on what to say. Of course it is. After all, I didn't have a father here to protect me from harm. Na spoke with spite clear in his voice. The spectral stab into his heart caused the Senate to cringe a bit. You were my godfather, weren't you? With the immediate death of my parents, it became your job. No obligation to take care of me. I know you had an important job in collecting information for Konoha's benefit, but why didn't you take me along with you? Na asked. The shame rolling off the sen was overwhelming the anger with each word that was spoken. I couldn't bring a baby with me into enemy territory and environments babies shouldn't really be exposed to, he said, opening his eyes to look at the young blonde. The Genin's eyes were piercing into Jiraiya's soul. Don't give me that. You are one of the Sonnen of Konoha, a cage-level shinobi with a reputation higher than that of my father. Are you telling me in all of your wisdom, you didn't know how to do a simple shadow clone? Na asked, his own anger surfacing suddenly. Narubaka, control your anger. Yoko exclaimed loudly with fear and worry for Naruto's safety. I'm ashamed to tell you. I wasn't really thinking back then. But I did leave you in the capable arms of my sensei. Jiraiya said, his anger leaving his heart even more. A lot of help that did. The idiot went and told the people of my condition minutes after the conclusion of the attack. I'm surprised I wasn't killed right then and there by the angry populace. Naruto seethed, not hearing Yoko's words of warning. But he created a law forbidding everybody to call you a demon, tell the younger generation of your condition, and harming you in any way. That law was made to protect you, Jiraiya yelled, anger raising in his voice. Ha, that law did the exact opposite. All it did was make my life a living pain in the shadows of this very village. Every day I was tormented in every way I could think of. I was beaten, scorned, neglected, denied food, and I was even kicked out of the orphanage. And that was only in the first 5 years. But do you know what happened next? I was liberated. Ha ha. Brought into the sadist arms of Orochimaru. He took care of me, taught me basic knowledge, trained me. My father chose the wrong man to be my godfather. Naruto said with power surrounding his being. The power was sadistic in nature, and it made him feel a bit less ecstatic. Whenever he uses Yoko's chakra, he knew from experience just how he looked at the moment. Dark rip-like patterns were spread across his entire body. The only visible spots was his face and his hands. It happened faster than he could react. Next thing the blonde knew, he was launched into a tree before Jiraiya jammed his forearm into his throat. He coughed up a bit of blood as he looked into Jiraiya's angry eyes. Don't ever insinuate that Orochimaru is a better godfather than me. Everything good that's ever happened to you in that village was because of me and my agents. The clothes you were given, the money, the food. I even struck up a deal with Sensei for me to give you some of my own money every month days after you were kicked from the orphanage. But you didn't get to receive any of it because my traitorous teammate ripped you from my grasps. Do you realize how miserable that made me? I searched high and low for you, but you were even harder to find than my teammate. It took me returning here to find out why. Jiraiya yelled, pressing his arm harder into the blonde's throat, nearly crushing it. All the blonde could do was stare into the toad sage's eyes, tears flowing freely from the glance. Very quickly, the rip-like pattern of his cursed mark of earth receded behind the resealed wall of the Fujihine. Evil sealing method. As he thought about Jiraiya's words, he continuously apologized to Yoko for ignoring her warning. Things got heated unexpectedly real fast. He searched his mind, finding those memories quickly and reliving them. They were the best memories he had before going to Orochimaru. But there were very few of them in number. Still not enough effort, the blonde thought as his body exploded in smoke before immediately blending with the air. It happened in such a fashion that Jiraiya believed it was a shadow clone he was talking to the entire time. Well, if it was a clone, then its memory was going to be transmitted directly to the original at this very moment. We share the same sorrow, Naruto-kun. Deep inside you, I know it's there. Like you, I hope that team of yours pulls you out of the darkness. Please, Kami, have them do what I couldn't. Jiraiya pleaded to Kami. Edge of the training ground. The blonde appeared on the opposite edge of the training ground away from the village. He appeared on his knees, his hands around his throat as he painfully coughed. If it wasn't for Yoko's continuous flow of chakra, his throat would have surely been crushed and he would be dead. What the did I tell you? I told you not to calm yourself. I told you so many times, but you were too busy reeing the anger in that man's heart. You don't do that to someone stronger than you stupid idiot. Yoko yelled at her container, adding insult to his injury. Sorry, Yoko-chan. I really am. I really don't know what came over me. One minute I'm cool and collected, the next I'm filled with anger from my past. The blonde apologized in his mind. What have I told you about using that seal? Do you know what Orochimaru would do if he learned what I did to it? Again, you refuse to listen to me. I swear if you jeopardize your girl one more time, you could kiss it goodbye forever. Yoko chided more as the blonde stood to his feet. I'm not going to act any more stupid from now on. Next time me and Jiraiya meet, things will be different. Who knows, maybe I could even get him to train me as well. Na thought while Yoko scoffed. In your dreams, he's never going to do that. Not when he knows who trained you beforehand, she said as her chakra receded back inside the seal in her skull accessory, its eyes glowing red for a moment before returning to normal. That could easily work in my favor. We all know how sadistic Orochimaru is. I could easily just feed him the lie that I hate what Orochimaru did to me during the training. That offered. I guess that could work, especially since it's not entirely a lie. That man is a sick bastard, Yoko said with a soft shudder. You'll have to give it some time, though. Things like that require time, especially after what just transpired, she said. Both of them being reminded of Naruto's rashness. I said, sorry, I'll make it up to you tonight. I'll do whatever you want me to do. The blonde promised as the kitsune inside him squealed in delight, having something already in mind. But, Na thought, cutting the woman off. We have things to do. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The blonde crouched on a fire escape inside a darkened alley. He wasn't aware if it was possible to do the procedure without sight, but he knew he wanted to see the process himself. He was wearing a dark cloak with a hood and a mask completely covering his body in black. Because it was still daytime, he had to be extra stealthy not to cause any noise. This abduction had to go off without a hitch. Any pair of useless eyes would do, the blonde thought as he pulled out a syringe filled with yellow liquid. It was Amelia's paralytic toxin, and it was a small dose. He widened his senses and quickly put the syringe away. There were at least 3 Jonin, 4 Chunin, and maybe 2 Anbu around his immediate location, at least a dozen yards in all directions. With the Anbu being the closest, directly above him on the roof, he knew if he moved even an inch, he would be spotted. He lowered his chakra levels even further to undetectable levels. Naruto's brow twitched when he saw a homeless man walking through the alley alone and drunkenly slurring. He and the Anbu watched the man clumsily walk through the alley, none the wiser of the predator and savior watching him careful. Lie. Both of them watched the man for 3 minutes before the blonde heard the Anbu grunt in approval and jump away. Naruto chose that moment to act, and quickly his tactics were changed due to John and talking at the mouth of the alleyway. His body turned into smoke and he wafted down around the drunken man. The mass of swirling black smoke shrunk around the man before disappearing entirely into the earth below. XXXL and FXX. A good 5 minutes went by before the blonde appeared in the underground network the root agents used. His hand was clasped over the mouth of the man who was screaming into it. Naruto punched the man in his stomach and watched his eyes glaze over and he slipped into unconsciousness. He ripped his hand away from the man's mouth and removed his mask. He looked around to see at least 24 root agents around him. He was right in the middle of their training area. Most of them didn't pay him any mind as they were too busy training to care. Though 2 members looked at him blankly, he stared at the black-haired boy and grinned. Sorry for the intrusion. I'll get out of your way, Na said as he hefted the man over his shoulder. Oof. He's a heavy one, Na muttered before shakily walking towards an unoccupied room. After 3 minutes of strained walking, the sound of a cane hitting the ground made itself obviously known. To what do I owe the pleasure this time, Naruto? Danzo said from behind the blonde. Na shook the man's body off of him and he turned and bowed to the bandaged elder. Apologies for my unannounced entry into your domain. Na respectfully apologized to the elder. Danzo waved the apology off with a shake of his head. No need for that. I've gotten used to your intrusions, although I would like to know what you are doing with that man right there. He asked, pointing at him with his cane. Na glanced at the unconscious man with cold eyes. I need him alive for the time being. Because of circumstances beyond my control, I had to bring him here. May I have a free room to operate? The blonde asked politely. Sure. Only if I can watch, Danzo said with a narrowed eye. Na prevented himself from showing any signs of discomfort at the proposition. Yoko was growling angrily inside the blonde's mind. He's so nosy, she seethed through clenched teeth. Easy there, Yoko. Although I'm with you, I just want to kill him right now. Na though before opening his mouth. It's going to take a while. Are you sure? I don't want to waste your time, he said, hoping the man would back off. Danzo grunted in thought. Maybe you're right. Luckily, I don't have anything happening at the moment. Plus, this would give me more insight into your knowledge, the elder said, causing Naruto to mentally scream. Are you sure you need another pair of eyes to do this? Why not just have a clone operate on you in the comfort of your own home? Yoko suggested, causing the blonde to stop in thought. With what he was going to do, the result would be the same whether or not he or a clone did it. That could work as well. Oh my god, Yoko. I love you, Na yelled in his mind as he took out a kanai. Change of plans, Danzo, the blonde said, throwing the kanai through the back of the man's head. Thanks for the help anyway, he said, placed the mask back on his face and waved at the elder. Yan, he said as he and the man's body disappeared in a swirling mass of black smoke. Danzo narrowed his eye at the spot Naruto previously occupied. He tapped his cane loudly and 3 agents appeared in front of him. Watch him, he simply said before they disappeared. 10 minutes later, the blonde spent 10 minutes trying to get to his apartment. Trying was the keyword since he immediately sensed a tail on him. He had discarded the cloak and mask and swallowed the smoke. He still had need of them after all. He dropped down into the busy market street and began walking on foot. It would be difficult for the root members to follow him throughout the mass of bodies surrounding him. He slipped inside a restaurant and exhaled a sigh. Hey Naruto. A yell was heard from across the room. The blonde turned around to see Ino and her team having a meal together. He blinked and looked around. Damn, a barbecue shop. The blonde cursed in his mind as he walked over to them. Hey, Enoch-chan, isn't this a surprise? He said with an uneasy chuckle. Here, sit by me. Move over, she exclaimed in a hushed tone as she pushed her sensei further towards the wall. He complained a bit, but otherwise allowed himself to be moved. The male blonde nervously chuckled at that as he sat down. Sorry, Asuma-sensei, I won't be long, he told the Jonin. That's all right, Naruto-kun. I already got used to her brash behavior. The bearded Jonan said, as did we all. Shikamaru commented with a lazy tone. So, how was your test today? Did you pass? Ino asked while hugging Naruto's arm. The test was a bit challenging considering who my teammates were, but we managed to pull the rabbit out the hat. Nah, as he leaned into her, I heard about that in he meeting earlier. Everyone was surprised to hear Kakashi passed a team. Out of all the previous students assigned to become Kakashi's team, absolutely none of them passed. Asuma revealed, causing Ino to gasp in surprise. That man is very picky about who he trains. Yeah, I picked up on that, Naruto said, scratching his cheek before he reached for a raw piece of meat. His hand was quickly slapped by Ino, causing Na to retract his damaged hand back. That's not for you, mister. We're going to need our strength for more missions today, she explained while fake tears build up in the male blonde's eyes. Ino, why do you have to go and do that? Maybe Naruto's really hungry. Shoji softly told Ino before subsequently reaching for the meat Naruto was going for and cooking it before eating it. Na sniffed as Ino flicked his nose. You're not fooling anyone here, Naruto-kun. I'll take you out to dinner tonight. Okay. The whiskered blonde grinned with a nod of his head. Can we have barbecued eel? He asked as Ino giggled softly. Don't go making plans when you already have plans. Yoko yelled at him. Of course, she said, kissing his cheek. No go. Do whatever you were doing before coming in here, she said, patting his butt as he got up. Chill, Yoko-chan. I need an alibi for tonight, he thought to the semi-jaloux Kitsune. All right, Enoch-chan. See you later, he said before exiting the restaurant. There's something off about Naruto-san, Shikamaru mumbled aloud. The platinum blonde immediately turned defensive and glared at Shikamaru. There's something off about your face. She yelled. XXXL and FXX again. Naruto was outside on the run. Things didn't seem to change at all. He was still being tailed, causing him to growl in annoyance. Well, damn. Danzo would understand why I have to kill these guys. Naruto-kun, the goal, Yoko reminded him with a mighty yell. He sighed and landed in an unoccupied alley and called out to his followers. A full minute went by before the three from before landed in front of him. Why is Danzo having me followed? He asked with a twitch of his eye. That's classified, one of the agents spoke behind their mask. Does he not realize that I found another way to do what I need to do? Na asked with another twitch of his eye. He does, another agent simply said. The blonde's fists were clenched in annoyance at the lack of emotion in their voices. Do you three realize that you need to be eliminated now? I won't kill you, just hurt really bad. How you get back to Danzo is up to you. Na said before one of the agents scoffed. You can try. It's 3-1, the last agent said. Na smirked. Rookie, he thought before vanishing. 2 kanai were in his hands as he appeared behind the trio. He stabbed both of the kanai into the shoulders of one of them while the others turned, drawing their tontos. The blonde kicked the tonto out of the rookie's hand and used the other leg to roundhouse him in the jaw. He ripped the cane out of the injured agent's shoulders and blocked the strike. He parried and slashed through his mask before his other hand smashed through it. He glanced to his side and his torso turned into smoke as a leg swept through it. Smoke quickly wrapped around the rookie's leg, forming the bandages before he was flung into the wall. As Naruto's body reformed immediately, he turned his head to the first agent and grabbed his fist. He quickly pulled and kneed him in the stomach. After that, he quickly spun and kicked his feet from under him, sending him falling onto his bleeding back. The blonde turned his attention back to the second agent and quickly moved his head out of way of the speeding Tonto. 3 more strikes he dodged before he smashed his fist against the cracked mask, this time causing it to shatter. He looked back to the rookie before Naruto thrust his arm out. Immediately, the black python shot out of his arm and quickly wrapped around the rookie. Don't crush him, Victor. The blonde hissed at the python. Why not, SSA? The black python hissed back to the blonde. Just don't. I know you haven't been able to enjoy yourself in a long time, but just chill for now, the blonde said as Victor hissed angrily. Naruto sent Amelia to paralyze everyone before she returned to his sleeve. That'll keep you 3 here for a few hours. I'll have a clone hide each of you from any patrolling ambu. When you return to Danzo, tell him not to send any more of you to follow me anymore. He said, creating 3 clones while Victor returned to his right sleeve. He jumped onto the roof and released a sigh. This has already been a long day, and it's not even close to being finished, he muttered in exhaustion. He let out another sigh before resuming his trip home. 15 minutes went by before he entered his apartment. Kaide was outside of her apartment having a drink. Her face immediately brightened upon seeing the blonde. "Hey, Naruto-kun," she exclaimed in joy. The blonde immediately noticed the John and vest around her person. "I see somebody finally did as they were told," the blonde jokingly said as she let out a sarcastic laugh while she squeezed him to her chest. "I've been a Jonin for a month. Where have you been?" she asked both figuratively and literally before spotting his headband. "Oh wow, you finally became a ninja. I'm so proud of you," she happily yelled while squeezing him tighter into her bosom. "And you finally became a Jonin. I'm proud of you." Na joined her in praise as he returned the hug with equal vigor. The two released their embraces and smiled at each other. "You sure have grown since the first time we met. I remember when you were a quiet, perverted recluse living next door," she said as Naruto softly chuckled. "Now you're an open perverted genin living next door." She finished with a giggle before taking a sip of her sake. "Not to mention that pretty little girlfriend of yours. I see I have her to thank for finishing my job," she complained with a hand on her hip. Na chuckled while rubbing the back of his head. It was something he used to do with the Hokage when he was younger. He let out a sigh and grinned at the rookie Jonin. "Don't be like that, Kaide-chan. There's still a lot you could do for me." Kaide grinned and rubbed his head. "Of course, there is Genin," she said giggling. "Say I have today off. How would you like to finally have that training match you've been bugging me about?" Kaide asked before downing the rest of her sake. The blonde's face brightened in joy. "Okay, I have the rest of the day off as well. Just give me a few hours to take this nap and I'll meet you at training ground 7. At 7 o'clock, Naruto told her. Kaide's eyes shined in mischief as she crossed her arms under her. "Oh yeah, it's past 3, your nap time," she teased. The blonde playfully groaned. "Don't call it that," he told her with a playful pout. "I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, but that's what it is," she said with a giggle as she threw an arm around his shoulders. "Once you stop having naps in the middle of the day, I'll stop teasing you about it," she said before lifting his headband off his forehead and kissed it. She placed the protector back onto his forehead and patting his shoulder blades. "Go on now. Enjoy your nap time. You're going to need it later." She winked before heading towards her own apartment. "That's the second time a girl shoved you away today. Wow, it's like you're a piece of meat to them and me," she said in a sultry tone that told Na she was also winking at him. Naruto sighed and undid the seal to his apartment before entering it. He bit his thumb and smeared blood on the door, making it impenetrable once again. He immediately went to work, and 10 minutes later, his apartment was different. A white sheet was on the floor, and 3 bright lamps were directing the gazes around it. He was lying in the middle of the floor with a clone kneeling beside him. "Okay, clone, make me proud," he said before the clone weaved through a few hand seals and sent the original blonde to sleep. There was a medical kit near the original's head and the clone opened it. He removed some gauze in the bag of cotton balls. He looked down at the 2 syringes, one labeled left and the other labeled right. He picked up the left syringe and carefully inspected it. Inside was the black smoke of the left Byakugan eye. He sighed as he looked at the sharp needle point at the end of the syringe, though it was covered to prevent the smoke from escaping. He placed it back on the sheet and did the same to the right syringe. Finding both of them intact and ready for transport, he got ready to operate. He placed a surgical mask over his mouth and created another clone to be his assistant. "Okay, we have a job to do on the boss. You already know what it is, so let's get started," the lead clone told the other. The clone had already sterilized the needles earlier, so he and the clone put on the gloves. The lead clone picked up the syringe, and the other clone peeled the original's eyelids back with tape, strengthened by the lead clone's chakra. It looked nasty, seeing the blonde with his eyeballs unprotected with light shining around them. The lead clone nodded to the assistant and picked up the right Bakugan syringe. He removed the cap and used his control over the smoke to keep it in place. "Here we go," he muttered as he inched the needle point closer and closer towards Naruto's contracted pupil. After many careful seconds, the needle pierced the original's eye and continued to for another few seconds. His brow had already gained a sheen of sweat that was immediately wiped away by the assistant. The needle stayed in place for a few more seconds while the clone took careful breaths of air. He held his breath and pushed the smoke into the eye as slow as possible. As the smoke began entering the eye, blood began slowly spilling from around the right eye. Quickly, the cotton balls. The lead clone told the assistant, who quickly began to clean up the blood, freely flowing around the eye. The lead clone watched carefully as the eye continued to be filled with smoke, the white of the sclera turning black as more smoke filled it. A full minute passed before the syringe was empty. The entire eye was black and the smoke was moving around freely. Now it's my turn, Yoko said from inside the clone's mind. With the needle still in the blonde's pupil, Yoko channeled her chakra into it through the needle. The clone kept the needle as still as a statue while the assistant continued to softly pat his forehead, removing the accumulating sweat and leering up the blood leaking from the original. A full 20 minutes passed before the eye was turned a solid black. Okay, place the gauze over that eye, Yoko told the assistant clone as the lead clone slowly removed the needle, Yoko's chakra healing up the microscopic hole. After the square gauze was secured over the right eye, they gave the left eye the same treatment. Another 30 minutes passed as they placed the gauze over the left eye as well. A large bundle of bloodied cotton balls was piled beside Naruto's head, and the lead clone was exhausted. You two did an excellent job. Na will be very proud of you too. Yoko praised the two clones as they began cleaning everything up. Thank you, Yoko-sama. The lead clone said, accepting her praise. After everything was cleaned up and Naruto was placed on his bed with black bandages wrapped around his Yes, XXXL and FXX. An hour and a half passed before the blonde woke up. He yawned as he sat up and tried to open his eyes. He found them bound tightly. As he reached for the bandages, he heard Yoko's warning. Don't. Just like with the original Bakugan eyes, your new eyes need to heal. Even more so, because of the procedure. I have to give it to Orochimaru. When it comes to these freaky kind of things, he knows his stuff. Yoko said with an uneasy tone. It wasn't easy for her to praise Orochimaru. How long do I have until these eyes are ready for the light? Na asked aloud. Without me speeding up the process, it'll be a good 4 to 5 hours, she answered with a thoughtful tone. I don't really have that much time. I don't even have to look at a clock to know it's around 6:30. What about the estimated time with you speeding up the process? He asked as he laid back down. The time drastically increases to 1 hour until recovery. Unless you want to cancel the training with Cade or the date with Ino, you won't be stressed for time for whatever reason. Yoko suggested. Na shook his head. I'm doing everything I made plans for, including the plans you have in store for me. I'll just have to train with Cade without my sight. You want me to channel my chakra through the cursed seal to shorten the time more. If I do that, I'll have them healed in 20 minutes. Yoko informed in a thoughtful tone. That's perfect. I'm glad I'm not a civilian. Otherwise, this would take a good 2 weeks to recover from. Na said as a rush of chakra began speed up the healing process in his eyes. You and me both, Yoko said happily. Wake me when you finish. I can't wait to see my new eyes, Na said before he weaved through a few hand seals and summoned a cobra. Said cobra appeared already around his arm. I need you to deliver a message to Orochimaru, he said to the brown snake. Write it and all SSC that it's delivered, the snake hissed. Na nodded before he began to think. Tell him to summon Vivi at midnight. The forbidden scroll will be inside him. And tell him thanks for the tip. I can already feel the power these new eyes are giving me. Understood, the cobra simply said before vanishing. After the cobra left, Na simply meditated on his back, simply embracing the feeling of his eyes. Time flew by quickly because Yoko told him she was finished. Excited, Na stood to his feet and quickly walked to the bathroom. He was glad it wasn't far away, but he nearly ran into the wall by the door. He quickly began to unravel the bandages and peeled the bloodied gauze from over his eyes. He kept them closed as he situated himself in front of the mirror. He slowly opened them and watched his new eyes' reaction. The black in his eyes swirled and completely vanished into the entire eye was white. The reaction continued as his black pupil returned. It was his irises that surprised him. Instead of the dark blue eyes he was used to, the shade of blue lessened to that of the color of azure. He grinned and activated what used to be the Bakugan. Instead of the bulges accompanied with his vision being enhanced to unbelievable levels, His eyes turned into a mixture of silver and blue. Whoa, Naruto breathed out in surprise. That should fix the vein problem. That's your Byakugan with a few added abilities. Yoko explained. I don't know about the added ones, but I'm glad to see that blind spot has been fixed. Na said while waving his hand behind his head. With his eyes, he could see further than he used to. The distance multiplying by 3. He could see clearly through the buildings in the entire village. He shortened the distance as a blush appeared on his cheeks. He focused on his neighbor below him. He could clearly see his chakra points and even the organs in his body as well as his skeletal structure. Hey Yoko, did you know Ken downstairs had a broken tibia? I can clearly see the small cracks running along the bone. Na asked the woman, how much do you love me? Yoko gloated while she did a victory dance in his head. A lot. What else did you do to these eyes? Naruto asked as he deactivated them, returning them to Azure. I gave them some sort of lock-on feature. I was thinking of your chakra bow when I did that. Even when they're not activated, you could see through illusions, mist, and smoke, no matter how much there is. Also, I left you a surprise for whenever you enter level 2 of your cursed seal. Yoko informed the blonde who grinned whiter into the mirror. His body turned into smoke for a matter of minutes, and when he solidified, his attire was changed. His previously green GI turned white and his black muscle shirt remained the same. His black cargo pants became black cargo shorts with white flames licking the bottom. His black sandals turned into white steel-soled shoes. Ebony and ivory were unsealed and holstered behind his hips in an X fashion. Their seals underneath his now white bandages were replaced to hold shurikens. New clothes, new me, Naruto said with a smirk as even the cloth for his headband changed from dark blue to white. Ooh. I am digging the new look. You better be even more careful when you leave the house. The girls are going to be all over you. Whether you're with Ino or not, Yoko seductively spoke, more than liking what she saw. Let's do this, Na said, clenching his bandaged fists in front of his body as his body exploded into smoke. Na felt elated as he seemingly floated over the buildings of Konoha's market district. He didn't know how better things would be with his new eyes. It was even better than the first time he tried on a new set of eyes. He laughed as he picked up the speed and he became even more of a blur to others. It was nice to see he no longer got tunnel vision. One of the perks of these new eyes, no doubt. It'll make it easier for him to go full speed now. These new eyes are even better than the Sharing and Byakugan put together. The blonde praised in his mind as the tree line entered his sights. Better than them individually, but not together. Close though. I did do a great job though, Yoko said, accepting the praise with a giggle. Na nodded and cleared the first half-dozen of trees. He landed on a branch and searched for Cade with his new eyes. It didn't take long, which caused him to smirk widely. He immediately wondered what her reaction would be to his new eyes. He looked at the setting sun and nodded in silent recognition. He hopped in his neighbor's direction and within seconds landed on the log to her left. About time you got here. I was wondering if you were. She trailed off as she turned her head to look at the blonde. Ooh. Nice. You changed just for me. Cade cooed before Na rolled his eyes. That made Cade do a double take before she grabbed Naruto's head and brought him closer. What's up with your eyes? I don't remember them being this light, she asked before Naruto's head turned to smoke and he drifted back a few feet. Na smiled and opened his eyes wider. You like? Na said as Cade put her hands on her hips. She narrowed her eyes and took a single step closer. I'm not sure yet, she answered. Naruto widened his smile, seeing the way Cade was looking at his eyes. He knew she liked them. She didn't even have to deny it. How about we get this fight going? I want to see what you're finally made of, Naruto said, taking a stance. The blonde's words knocked the new Jonin from her thoughts. She took out 2 kunai and held them in a reverse grip. Blood and bones, like everyone else. Well, except you since you're made of smoke, she winked as the blonde groaned. I'm not made of smoke. I can turn into smoke, he complained before charging the woman. Cade shrugged with a smile on her face. Potato tomato, she said before backpedaling before hopping onto a tree, throwing both of her kunai in the process. Na inwardly groaned again as he jumped out of the way. He extended his arms and 3 shuriken appeared on each side of him. He acted fast and grabbed all 6 of them between the fingers of each hand and threw them at the chocolate-haired woman. She dropped down from the branch and heard each of the shuriken hit nod a second later. As soon as her feet touched the ground, she weaved through a series of seals. Kaden, Piro Buroi, Hiro Buroi, she muttered before exhaling little balls of fire that floated in the 3 feet from the ground. There was 24 in total, and most were under Naruto's position. Ooh. That's interesting. The blonde thought as he began descending. He formed a series of his own seals and held his breath. Futon Dapper great breakthrough releasing that technique straight down caused the blonde to be suspended in midair. It also caused the balls of fire to explode outwards. Kaid shielded her face from the airborne embers and used chakra to stay in her position from the strong wind. The blonde landed on the ground and removed ivory from her holster. I see someone went with fire. I thought I told you to try water, Naruto asked while she removed her arms from in front of her face. Sorry about that. Fire just chose me first, she said before coating her feet in electricity. Let's see how fast you are now, she said before vanishing from Naruto's sight. The blonde's eyes widened at her speed. He knew she was fast, but seeing her moving like this really cemented that fact. Not a second later, his body was in smoke, scattered in different directions. He quickly thinned out as Kate stood in the middle of the field, her senses on full blast. A full minute went by before Na stealthily reformed in the trees. Let's see if she can handle this, Na thought before forming the ram seal. Instantly, shurikens erupted into the clearing from all sides. The new Jonin acted quick and quickly began evading the projectiles, but as soon as they hit the ground, they caused a small explosions. She continued to dodge the now exploding projectiles and quickly darted through the trees. Na smirked as his clones dispelled and he turned into smoke and followed his neighbor. Kaid narrowed her eyes as she still couldn't sense Na. Where could he be? She muttered knowing he was able to effortlessly turn into sightless smoke. Naruto stood on a branch about 100 meters away from Kaid. He had to give her props. She sure could move fast. He activated his nameless eyes and locked onto her signature. It was suppressed, but he could still see her body. When he activated that feature of his eyes, everything became black and white, and she became bright red. He smirked at that, and his white bandages slowly turned into smoke. Let's cut her speed down, he thought with a mental sigh of relief before she began moving around, keeping her head on a swivel. Naruto stood to his feet and headed back into the clearing, fully intending on cutting her off. By the time he got there, she had just arrived. Hello, Kaid-chan. Fancy meeting you here, he said before she continued at her speed and moved to punch him. By this time, the blonde had gained a bit accustomed at her speed and was able to defend better than the John expected. After the 12th blocked strike, Kaid jumped back in thought. I think there's a tiny detail I seem to overlook, she said, crossing her arms under her bosom. Na smirked as his silvery blue eyes became darker because he wasn't facing the moonlight. Sorry, Kaid-chan. Some things are meant to be secret, he said before raising his fist and closing it tightly. Only then did Kaid realize that the bandages that always seemed to be wrapped around the blonde's arms weren't there anymore. It was rather easy to learn just where they went. The feeling around both of her calves confirmed everything as they bound her calves together. It was lucky she wasn't on the move or else she would have easily fell on the ground. She rose her brow at his words while simultaneously taking out a kunai. So if I win this spar, you have to tell me who trained you. Now it was Naruto's turn to raise a brow. You're a Jonin and you don't know how I thought Hirozen would have told all the higher-ups in the village by now. Na said since he thought she was talking about something else more along the lines of his eyes. Kaid threw the kanai down at the bandages but found that the projectile went straight through smoke. Wow, this is completely cheating, she said playfully glaring at the blonde. While she was glaring at the blonde, she didn't notice the shifting of motion around her calves. The bandages separated and only wrapped around one individual calf before slightly glowing. Na smiled as the job was done. Sorry, Kaid-chan. I fixed everything, so you don't have to worry anymore, Na said as Kaid rose an eyebrow and looked down. She saw that they had separated and wrapped around each of her ankles. Though she felt different, more heavy. She looked at Na slowly, a look of annoyance on her face as she realized what he did. These bandages of yours are lined with gravity seals, aren't they? That would explain why you were able to block my attacks earlier, she said, trying to take a step forward. Her leg muscles weren't used to physical weight being placed on them, only the electrical current of her chakra. I bet you aren't used to that, Na said with a smile as he removed Ebony from her holster. Just think of this as training. How fast can you move before you get cut? He said quickly, running forward. A surge of electrical chakra erupted from around Cade's calves before she jumped back at Chunan's speed. Na smirked as he easily followed her. With no weight around his arms, his swings were much greater. Though Kide showed surprising flexibility and bent her body backwards as Ebony harmlessly flowed above her. She would have tried to do a back flip and kick Naruto in the crotch or something, but she knew he would have blocked with his now superior speed. She stood upright and quickly pulled out a kunai to block the blonde's rebound attack. The blonde didn't let up as he quickly clenched his free fist and swung straight for her face. The chocolate-haired Jonan quickly tilted her head and lowered it as Naruto tried to motion to hit her in the ear. Quickly, reflexes. More than I expected. Really? Na said with a smirk as he pulled his fist back. Kide smiled as she strained against his onyx knife. Of course, I've conditioned my upper body to react quickly. Got to protect those vital organs, she said as she saw Naruto's smirk deepen. Well, let's see if you can move fast enough to protect this, he said, throwing his fist towards the base of her throat. He wasn't disappointed when her own free arm snatched up and grabbed his hand. My arms are a part of my upper body, she said as she peered into his eyes and found the silver and blue mixture. Why do your eyes keep changing? She asked before noticing Naruto tense. Immediately, she knew something was about to happen and prepared to jump back from the coming danger. Time slowed as Naruto jumped slightly in the air. He planted his feet onto Cade's stomach and pushed with all his strength. It was also at that moment that Cade released his wrist and her body was flying backwards a second later. Time returned to normal as Naruto quickly took Ivory from her holster and threw her at Cade while he spun and ridded himself before landing on his feet. Cade was surprised as the knife hastily flew by her arm, slightly cutting into it before thudding against the tree behind her. Her body hit the thick trunk moments after it did. Woo, you were definitely trained by someone really strong and for a long time, too. I think it should have been you to be taking that John exam, she said as Naruto's eyes returned to normal. He smiled as he jumped closer to Cade. Thank you for bracing for kick. If you hadn't already been preparing to jump back, I would have felt bad if I had hurt you, he said, extending his arms. As the bandages turned to smoke and quickly wrapped around his arms and reformed his bandages. You still hadn't answered my question. Do you have another bloodline I don't know about? She said, looking at the blonde with a pout while he removed Ivory from the trunk of the tree and holstered her. The blonde rolled his eyes at her pout. Even with their time apart, the blonde hadn't forgotten about her use of the pout technique. I don't know why you're pouting. You know that only works about 50% of the time, Na said before looking away as he scratched his cheek. But if you must know, it's a gift given to me by Yoko. She gave it to me while I was taking my nap, so I was surprised myself. Na said as Cade tilted her head. The Jonan smiled and stood to her feet. That's awesome. You think Yoko could do that to my eyes too? She asked as Naruto shook his head. Sorry, Kide-chan, but I don't think I would forgive myself if you were rid of your beautiful chocolate brown eyes. He said as she chuckled and patted him on the head. Well, it was worth a try. But look at how you've grown. I guess I won't be learning your secret from your mouth. Well, on my way to Hokage. I'm sure he'll tell me everything he knows about you. She said, giggling before vanishing in a body flicker. Naruto groaned as he shook his head. He really should have made a deal that she couldn't go to the old man. Plus, he knew Cade enough to know that after the surprise, she'll realize that it didn't really change anything. They were still friends, and that was the most important thing. Na caught onto his train of thought and nearly slapped himself. Wow, this place really has changed you, Yoko said before Na blinked for a while. Naro chuckled a bit at her statement. Only a little bit. Every small change was necessary for the completion of the goal. You know this more than anyone. Na thought before his internal clock told him it was 7:35. You picking Ino up at 8 o'clock, which gives you 25 minutes of free time. Yoko informed the blonde, causing him to nod his head. The blonde nodded before some faint rustling was heard to the blonde's left. The genin acted as if he hadn't heard, but he did activate his fused eyes and mentally shook his head. He cancelled his eyes as he continued walking in a casual manner. He dug into his pouch and silently took out a pack of cigarettes in a lighter. He removed a cigarette and placed it between his lips. He lit it and took a long drag before exhaling the smoke towards the ground. He smiled as he pocketed the pack and lighter and took another drag. I love these little sticks of patience, he said, looking at it before yells of surprise was heard. He exhaled with a smile and walked in the direction. Within seconds, he was crouching in front of Konohamaru, the sandame's grandson. He had met the boy about a month ago while he was training with Ebony and Ivory. What do you want, brat? He asked while smothering the tip of the cigarette against the nearby tree. Konohamaru chuckled nervously while a long gray snake was wrapped around his body. You would think because its body was releasing small wisps of smoke that the young boy would be able to break free of it. Obviously, you would be wrong, as it was a snake born from Naruto's own chakra and made solid thanks to the special properties of his smoke. It took the blonde a good 2 months before he was able to make it that way, and he was proud of it. Didn't you learn your lesson the last time you tried to eavesdrop? The blonde asked as he slowly formed half a ram seal with his left hand. The young 8-year-old quickly shook his head in the negative, causing the blonde to smirk and pat his spiky brown hair. That's what I thought, Na said, standing to his feet, but keeping his smoking snake around the body. Stop trying to spy on me and go to sleep. It's way past your bedtime, he added as the snake dispelled and Na vanished along with it. Only then did Konohamaru stand to his feet. I don't care what you say. I'll get stronger than you, Naruto-san. The boy yelled as Na shook his head from the tree branch above the boy before leaving for real. XXXL and FXX. Na killed about 8 minutes simply thinking of the situation he was presented with at the Hokage Tower. The blonde immediately noticed a lot of jonins were hanging around the area. It was obvious the security had been increased and the unseen security seemed to be even more bulked. At the top were 4 Anu visible and making a smaller version of the barrier surrounding Konoha. He nearly cursed at that little detail. Inside the building were 2 large scrolls. It was obvious one of them were a decoy as it was filled with chakra. The other was underneath the building in a backup safe. Inside the safe were 5 hidden ambu. Damn, the blonde thought, noticing the room seemed to be sealed tight with only one way inside the vault door. Just at that moment, he noticed that one of the Anu on the outside of the vault opened it to let air enter the room. He smirked as that was his way in. He cancelled his eyes and stood to his feet. He was already on the Yamanaka's rooftop half a kilometer away from the tower. The Byakugan was really an amazing dojutsu, and the enhanced version was even more so. There was no doubt that if the Uchiha clan had been entirely eradicated, Orochimaru would be resorting to the eyes of a Hyuga. They didn't have the copying prowess the Sharingan had become famous for, but they were useful in their own way. Na leapt off the roof and turned around when he landed. He knocked on the door and it was immediately opened by Inoki. About time you decided to knock on the door. I was 1 minute away from kicking you off my roof, he said, agitated for the sole reason that Naruto was simply on his roof. The young blonde chuckled as he bowed in apology. Sorry, Enoki-san. I was waiting for it to be exactly 8 before knocking on the door to get Ino. We're going out to dinner tonight since both of us became genin recently. Na said as Enoki smiled widely. That is all right with me, boy. Although, I still don't fully approve of you two. I can't do anything because of you know who, he said, pointing his thumb behind him. At that moment, someone cleared their throat behind the older blonde. You would think it would be his wife, Eri, standing behind him, but it was Ino herself, her arms crossed under her budding and tapping her foot in annoyance at her father. The young genin was wearing a purple dress that went to her knees. It had thick straps that went over her shoulders and flowed outward the lower it went. It had 3 buttons at the top, and only one of them were buttoned, leaving the top 2 unbuttoned. If you're finished, Tuzan, I would like to go to dinner before we miss our reservations, she said as Naruto rose. A brow. Reservations. You did all that? He asked as Inoki turned and buttoned the 2. You know I'm not letting you leave this house dressing like that. He said as Ino glared at him but did nothing. Yeah. I knew you weren't. I know all about your nap times, she said with a smirk as Naruto groaned and lowered his head. Does everybody know about that? He asked in embarrassment as Yoko giggled but said nothing. You take naps in the middle of the afternoon? Enonoi asked as Naruto snapped his head up. Is that why you can't make our sessions anymore? he asked as Naruto chuckled and took out a small scroll about chakra. Ino and the book switched places in an instant as Na wrapped her hand around her waist. I'm taking Ino. Bye, he quickly said before a whirlwind of leaves surrounded them and they disappeared. 50 feet away. The blonde duo appeared with Na smiling at Ino's surprised face. How do you know a technique I see my sensei use? She said with a raised eye. Na chuckled and took her hand in his. It's advanced high-speed technique. Anybody could learn it. It was easy, too. It literally took me 5 minutes to learn it. 7 to master, he said, flashing a wide smile in Ino's direction. The platinum blonde rolled her eyes and unbuttoned the top 2 buttons of her dress. You never did tell me how I looked, she said, flashing him a smile while putting a hand in her ponytailed hair. The male blonde looked at her for a few seconds before smiling. So, where are we eating? He asked as Ino bristled at the question and glared at him. He chuckled and prevented Ino from hitting him. I'm kidding. You look beautiful as always, he said before kissing her on her cheek. That made Ino blush slightly as she barely willed her feet to move forward. She smiled and leaned her head against Naruto's shoulder. We're going to the Snip and Crab, the best seafood bar Konoha has to offer, she answered with a smile. Na smiled as he knew exactly where that place was. It's perfect that we're going there. It would prove to be the best alibi for me ever, he thought as a stream of smoke left his back and merged into the air. He leaned his head into Enos as everyone who they passed cooed at the cute couple. XXXL and FXXX. The small stream of smoke materialized itself on the roof. It was a small boy with gray hair. He had a simple black shirt with dark gray shorts. His eyes were black and his skin was pale. One look at the boy and everyone would think he was the most innocent boy in the area. Except for the twisted smirk on his lips. That was the most alien feature on the 7-year-old looking boy. He rose his hands and quickly swept them over his head as a black hood materialized over his head. Time to go to work, he said before simply becoming sightless. He flew through the air, it being a little difficult as he found himself going against the air current. It took him half an hour before he reached a roof around the large red tower. He was panting lightly at the energy it took to simply get there. He looked around and smiled when he noticed the smoking John and Asuma. The smoke he was exhaling would bring him just enough energy to complete the mission. The pale boy jumped into the nearest alley and made his way into the streets. He lost the hood and donned a confused look. Asuma noticed him immediately and rose his eyebrows. Hello, little boy, where do you think you're going? He asked as the young clone continued to look around in confusion. After a while, he looked at Asuma. Do you know where my mommy went? She said she was going to talk to her friend about getting us a place to sleep. I don't want to sleep outside anymore, the clone said as he noticed that Jonan had blew out a stream of smoke in the other direction. The clone mentally smiled as he had one of his hands stealthily collecting the smoke. Asuma looked on in worry as he frowned. I didn't see a woman come over here. Do you know your mommy's name? And I'll put out a search for her. The man asked as the clone shook his head. The clone frowned as he held his head with a single hand, the other being a stub. I don't remember this one time. Mama looked at me with red eyes, he said as Asuma looked at the stub. That's when this happened, the clone said, noticing the man's eyes on his stub. I had a wood hand, but she took it and told me we needed to eat. The story was getting to the John who was becoming angry at the actions of the boy's mother. All he needed to hear was the part about the red eyes, and he immediately began thinking of the Uchiha clan. Hey, Akamaiki-san, can you get roster book of the Uchiha clan? I want to see if this kid could point out his mother for me. Asuma said, turning to address the large male. The large black-haired man walked up to the son of the sanding. What kid? He asked as turned back to see that the boy was gone. He was just here, he stated in surprise. The man scoffed and folded his arms. Sure, there was a kid talking about his mother, he said sarcastically. We both know the clan was wiped out some time ago. No survivors save for Sasuke-san, he added before turning and returning back to his post. Asuma narrowed his eyes as he looked at the spot the boy was only moments ago. He dropped his cigarette and smothered it before turning and walking towards the tower. A feeling in the pit of his stomach telling him something was going to happen. Vault corridor. The pale clone perched himself on the roof, keeping his appearance transparent to their eyes. His skills in infiltration were unprecedented, and everyone in Sound knew it. It was why he was given this mission in the first place. The clone's smirk dropped when he noticed another Ambu leaving the room. He cursed, realizing he had to wait for the next time it was opened. He needed to move to a dark corner closer to the door. That way, he could quickly execute his plan. He moved 2 feet every 5 minutes. His minuscule use of chakra for his smoke form might trigger the senses of the Ambu. He counted at least 2 directly under him and 2 more at the mouth of the entrance on the other side of the vault. When he reached the door after 25 minutes, he looked back to see 2 people walking down the corridor. It was Asuma and his father. "Thank you, son, for pointing that out to me. I didn't realize I had the real scroll with me until you came and asked me to check on it," the old man said as his son carried the scroll beside him. "I just had a feeling, father. Though it took forever for you to determine that I was actually your son instead of a thief in disguise. I'm actually kind of hurt," the man said, figning hurt in his eyes as the 2 reached the door. Hai smiled and chuckled. "Can't be too careful, son. Especially since the scroll was almost taken rather recently," he said before and Andrew appeared beside him. He nodded and the masked man began turning the giant wheel lock. In the shadows, the clone watched in caution. It was faint, but the small traces coming from the scroll definitely told that it was the decoy. Again, he thanked Yoko for the new eyes before he narrowed them. The possibility of this being a ruse, them knowing that he was here preparing to steal the scroll, was undeniable. They entered the room, closing the door for 2 minutes, no doubt, informing the Ambu of the situation before the door was opened from the inside. The clone thought it was impossible until the dimming seal on the inside of the door completely faded from view told him how. He narrowed his eyes when he saw a wooden getter inside the vault before it was closed. The 2 Serbi shared small talk as they left carrying a large scroll. A scroll with no chakra inside of it. Again, he cursed himself for being so deep in enemy territory without being able to use just a little bit more chakra. He needed his eyes activated to check everything happening around him. So, literally for the next 10 minutes, he sent tiny amounts of chakra to his eyes. He did it once every 3 minutes and was thankful when, after they were activated, nobody reacted. He looked inside and saw that Jeria was inside with an oxygen tank. That wasn't the only thing though. He was also sitting with the forbidden scroll in his lap, waiting for him. He was still, though, his eyes were closed, and some kind of chakra seemed to be seeping through the walls and into his body. It was intriguing for the blonde to be seeing this, as it was never seen before. The clone mentally growled as he realized the predicament he was further put into. Suddenly, the man's eyes snapped open, revealing horizontal pupils and thick markings under his eyes. His nose grew a bit and warts appeared on them. Then he began to speak. "I still can't perfect this technique. How am I supposed to parade myself around the ladies with this giant nose?" the man said before wiping tears away from his sleeve. The clone narrowed his eyes when he realized nobody was coming to open the door. Wasting his time and making it closer to when the original Naruto would be finished with his date, thus losing his alibi. They were conspiring against him. Like the clone widened his eyes. Did they know about his smoke mutation? It was possible since the original used it to spar with Kaid and subdue Konohamaru. He cursed in his mind as he realized that he had to finish before the date was finished. Hopefully, Naruto chose to walk through the village where lots of people could see him. The clone steeled his gaze and looked for a possible opening the original might have missed. He nearly cheered when he noticed a sun-sized hole was in the far back of the vault near the floor. Then he began to think that maybe it was made there purposely. He took the chance and slipped through the roof. He spent the next 5 minutes navigating through the maze-like interior of the wall. Before he went through hole, he thought about something. There had to be a reason the sage's eyes were different with that technique of his. Orochimaru didn't know a thing about this transformation. And if he did, he never hinted at it. If there was one thing he knew, it was the Sunning were a clever bunch. Whether they were good, bad, or traumatized. He was proved right when he immediately heard words when he slithered through the hole. "It took you long enough to find that entrance." Now came the voice of the Toad Sage. The clone didn't say a word. Maybe if he didn't move, the Sonnen would think he was mistaken. Not even 5 seconds later did Jeria turn his head to look right in the clone's direction. "You're after this scroll, Aren't you? Nah. Again, his name was used without any honorific. It was weird coming from the man's mouth. It's okay. You can show yourself. I know about your ability and the chakra is no doubt yours, even if it's in the form of a real clone now, he said as the clone remained in a sightless cloud of smoke. Fine. Stay in that mutated form given to you by Orochimaru. I guess he was able to give you something unlike anything ever heard of, Jiraiya said, turning his head back to the front of the bright room. I know you're confused how I put things together with only hours between our first meeting. It was pretty easy when you collect enough information and look at it from your perspective, Jiraiya said, causing the clone to raise an eyebrow as he slowly drifted around the room, awaiting the time when the entire room was covered in his chakra cloud. It became very clear that the chakra in the room was undetectable to the outside occupants, or else they would have been in here. It all started 2 years ago when you appear on the outskirts of the village, beaten and bloodied. One could easily see that entire scenario is being staged with your allegiance with Orochimaru now free to the Anbu Jonins and Chunins of the village. You could have been sent here for the sole purpose of blending in an attempt to steal the scroll and defect from the village after it was complete. Though that wouldn't explain anything, seeing the skill you have with that technique of yours. So, let's throw that out the window, Jiraiya said, leaning into hand in thought. The clone stayed silent as he continued circulating around the room, easily filling half of the room. If what the man said was true, then he shouldn't act until his chakra was easily filling the room. There's also another scenario I've considered. Jiraiya started once again, fully aware of the clone spreading motion. I've also considered that you could have attempted and barely escaped one of Orochimaru's lair and made your way here, but suffered for the treason. Thus, your state when you were found. Your behavior after that day could be attributed to survival, staying in the one place the snake wouldn't return to. Oh, you couldn't change how you were raised immediately, so it was slow for you to adapt back to being a happy boy with the damaged past. When we met earlier, you were filled with so much hatred. I feared you would run back to Orochimaru and talk to my sensei again. I didn't share any of my suspicions with him since I'm sure he feels the same way deep down, but I learned of the near theft of this scroll here, Jiraiya said lightly, patting the scroll as the clone's chakra fully filled the room. It doesn't take a genius to realize who was responsible with Mizuki's death when it became apparent that he wouldn't be able to escape. It doesn't take a genius to realize who knows the inner workings of the Yamanaka clan's mind abilities. Seeing as how you had sessions, but he was unable to enter your mind to really learn anything, what with the Kayabi in there and everything. Jiraiya began to break everything down, scaring the clone with how analytical he was. It was the main reason he didn't want to cross any of the sunning. Growling was echoed throughout the room as the clone grew angered with the man. At the first chance, this man really needed to die. He was entirely too dangerous to the boss, and his plans whilst alive. The air in front of Jiraiya grew darker before the boy's appearance became visible. He was wrapped in a dark gray cloak, and he removed the hood in a similar fashion to when he created it, only in reverse. His eyes were activated, not surprised when the man's heart retained its steady rhythm. I've been to your apartment, he said, cutting the clone off. The boy growled again, not liking that just happened. Truly a piece of art. If it wasn't for the secondary seal on the inside keeping everyone out, I would have been able to enter solely on the blood seal, he said, causing the pale clone to narrow its eyes. He remembered when the man rammed his arm into the boss's throat and blood was ejected because of the action. It doesn't matter how much blood you have of my boss. Once it's out of the body, the chakra is drained from it after a full hour. He said with an innocently soft voice, not uncommon with children his apparent age. Jiraiya smiled at the boy and nodded. Also, with the fact that I would also need the Kayabi's chakra to get into the house. With just that little detail, nobody would be able to get into his house. That must have been when this change occurred, he said, indicating the clone's silvery blue eyes. No doubt it was derived from the Bakugan eyes you were suspected of implanting into your sockets some time ago. How they became like that, I have no idea, he said, causing the clone to growl once more. I know what you're doing, Jiraiya of the Sunning. You're stalling for time, but you and I both know that it's no longer necessary, the clone said, smirking as he vanished from sight in the room in a split second. As the clone was leaving, he kept his eye on Jiraiya, who remained seated, the scroll no longer in his lap. Turning foreign objects to smoke was an easy matter, but doing it under someone's nose required finesse. It was better to start from the inside out and leave as soon as it was finished. Though, the fact that Jera wasn't surprised by it made the clone more cautious the more he nonchalantly began exiting the vault. He floated in the air above the Hokage Tower, having made it out of ground. The scroll was in smoke particles at the moment, but something told him to keep it that way forever. The clone's torso materialized, and he kept the bottom half a swirling mass of light gray smoke. He looked at the smoked scroll particles and growled when he realized what was wrong with it. A distant seal mixed with an exploding formula, further mixed with vanishing ink. All of that told him of the sheer skill the white-haired Sannin had with seals. So the further he got away from Jeria, more ink would disappear and form the exploding formula. And when it was fully formed, another few feet would ignite it and it was explode. The clone had to give the man his props. It was genius, and if he hadn't broke it down into smoke, it would have no doubt exploded, either in his hands or in Bivey's stomach. Which meant the real scroll was in the Hoage's possession. Maybe it had always been in his possession. He looked at the small smoke cloud in deep thought. If he could find the exact distance needed for it to be ready for explosion, then maybe he, the boss, could find a way to use it in a mission. He kept it circling around his body and fully turned into smoke before blending with the air. He slithered into the office to see Serbi talking with Jeria and Kakashi. His face was blank as he listened to Jeria's report. The Sonin's eyes had returned to normal, and his facial features were more akin to one that was frustrated, not in the blonde, but in himself. Kakashi listened on with a blank look as well. Like Jeria, he had seen enough of Naruto's behavior and skills to deduce what the man had said. It made the most sense. The blonde was simply trying to survive, and if was still in contact with the snake Sunning, then it was out of his control. Orochimaru may be sadistic, but even he has a weakness. Hai said, causing the two high-level shinobi look to the higher-level shinobi in interest. What could that be? I've been tracking him for more than a decade and I can't seem to think of one. Jeria said, crossing his arms. That's it. His sadistic behavior is his weakness. With the way he makes his subordinates follow him out of fear, it'll make it far more easier to turn them. Only Kami knows if that's happening with Narutkan at this very moment. Hai said as the other two nodded in agreement. At that moment the clone quit listening and drifted to where he knew the real scroll was. His eyes were still activated so it was easy to find it. He worked fast and it was turned into smoke and he kept that particular smoke cloud away from the trapped smoke. Yeah. This is the end of this little mission. The clone thought before rising out of the building, once again approaching the little barrier and spending the next minute and a half passing through it. He smiled and allowed the wind to carry him to where he knew the original was at. Training Ground 7. The blonde duo had traveled to the training ground to relax by the memorial stone. They were there for at least 20 minutes after they had wandered around the village for a while. By this time, Na was glad he had sent the clone to do that scroll mission. It wouldn't make him think of an excuse to do the mission. Now he can spend more time in her company. He was leaning against a tree with his legs crossed with Ino between his legs and her back to him. His arms were wrapped around her waist as his head rested on her shoulder. You know, Ino started simply getting a grunt out of her blonde companion. It's times like this that make me forget that I'm a kunoichi, she said, leaning into his touch. Yeah, Na simply questioned, too into the feel of her body to concentrate on her words. Yeah, she said, slightly turning her head to kiss his cheek. There's no missions to do. No kind of training to go through. Just you, me, and the moon, she said, looking up at the crescent-shaped moon. This made the blonde male chuckle. What's so funny? She asked, turning her head to look at him. Naruto opened his eyes to look into hers. You make it sound like you've been a kunoichi for a long time, he said, while Ino continued looking at his eyes. I still can't get over the fact that your eyes grew lighter. I miss the darker blue you once had, she said, pouting a bit, causing Naruto to blink a few times. Sorry, Ino, but once I figure out what happened to them, you'll be the first one to know, he said, puckering his lips for a kiss. The pupil Yamanaka looked at the Uzumaki's lips in thought. She knew that he would tell her when he wanted, but that didn't mean that she was a patient girl. Though now that they were a couple, delving into his mind would indefinitely do more damage than intended. She smiled at him and kissed him on the lips. Na returned the kiss and squeezed her a bit. He opened his eyes when he sensed his clone returning to his back. He also felt control over the two scrolls and mentally nodded when the memories of the clone entered his mind. The real forbidden scroll melted into his right arm while the fake scroll split into two separate clouds and melted into each individual foot. What was that? Ino asked, breaking the kiss after feeling a breeze go through her dress. The male blonde feigned a confused look. What was what? He asked as Ino looked at her moving dressing, still feeling the breeze. She sighed in realization when it was simply a breeze blowing through the forest. She looked back at the whiskered blonde and shook her head. Nothing, she said, resuming their kiss. Naruto smiled into the kiss while his eyes turned silvery blue underneath his lids. Just like he sensed half an hour earlier, Hinata was still watching him from about 300 meters away. From the looks of things, she was fidgeting with her shuriken holster, most likely finding this annoying in her eyes. Na thought back to that morning when she threatened to tell Ino about Yoko, something he's been thinking about the entire time they were together this night. If he showed her and Yoko was being Yoko, then she might get angry at him for having such a girl in his mind. But if Yoko was in her demonic form, she might become afraid of him and actively begin avoiding him. Like every time he began to think about that, Ino quickly picked up on his feelings. Okay, what is with you tonight? She asked, breaking the kiss and holding his chin. Na opened his eyes, deactivating his eyes in the process. What do you mean? He asked, covering her hand with his but not moving it. Ino pursed her lips. This entire night, I've noticed you've been retreating into yourself. Don't you like spending time with me? She pouted, letting go of his chin. But Naruto continued to hold on to her hand. This was it. Does he tell her about his container and brace for one of his deepest fears? Or does he lie to her face and make things worse for when she inevitably discovers everything about him? Naruto looked in Ino's eyes, surprised at her question, but hesitant to give his answer. He wasn't sure if he was ready for her to know about Yoko. Of course, I love spending time with you, Chan. I was just thinking about the future, he said, smiling at her, something she returned in spades. Well, of course you love spending time with me, she squealed in delight. I never really doubted you for 1 second, she added, widening her smile as she threw of something. So, what exactly about the future were you thinking about? Did you see my older self as your wife? She asked, fluttering her eyelashes at him sensually. The whiskered blonde smiled and pecked her forehead. That all really depends, he simply said, his tone of voice sounding as if he were teasing. The hell it doesn't. I'm your only wife, Yoko growled playfully from Naruto's mind while Ino pouted cutely. The platinum blonde tugged on the front of the Uzumaki's shirt and continued to gaze into his new eyes. Depends on what, Naruto-kun? She asked softly. Na rubbed the back of his head with a nervous chuckle before releasing a dejected sigh. All right, Enoch-chan, I have something to tell you. His words caused the platinum blonde to give a look of caution and worry. So, please don't say anything and let me finish what I have to say. He added, to which she gave a slow nod. The blonde boy saw this and took a deep breath, widening his senses, knowing Hinata was within hearing distances as well as someone else. The boy hadn't the slightest clue as their chakra was pretty well concealed. He felt no malice from the individual, just the curiosity they had towards him. The signature was new, having only arrived at this moment, too late for him to use his eyes once more, with Ino staring at his orbs so closely. He stared back into hers, taking a few breaths of air before reading himself. I have a big secret, one that I've been hiding from you in our class since the day I returned to the village, he said as her face remained unchanged, but her eyes were showing fear. Inside me, I have a source of immense power, limitless and toxic over long periods of use. Kurama is its name. That's what I've grown to know her as, he said, watching her even closer now. This village, however, calls her by a different name. He paused again, hearing her heartbeat increase. From the suspense and her pupil's eyes shift all over his face, moving constantly. He could smell the fear seeping from her pores, and it was the worst thing he's ever smelled from her. But yet, it had this strange aroma that he still enjoyed, if only a little bit. Keilu no Kitsune. When he spoke the title given to the nine-tailed fox, the strongest of the nine-tailed beasts to ever threaten the elemental nations, Ino let out a little gasp. Her frame began shaking from the fear. No. More like trembling as her eyes landed on his whisker marks. The trembling caused Naruto to frown in worry as Ino stood to her feet. "I'll let you think about that. Just don't forget what we share," he said, standing as well. He noticed her head was dropped and her eyes were shadowed by her bangs. Not a single word was muttered from her lips as she turned around and took a few steps. The two of them let out an inaudible sigh before the Yamanaka turned her head to look at Na. Tears were welled up in her eyes and one slid down her left cheek. "I'm sorry. I have to go home now," she said before quickly turning her head back, the tears drifting in the air as she ran away. The young Uzumaki knew the news was going to be devastating for Ino to hear. It really made him question why he even told her in the first place, but at least she heard it from her and not the mouth of Hinata, who would have worded everything differently and tried to make it seem worse than it actually was. "Don't worry, Naruto. I don't care if you have such a powerful and might I add beast inside of you." Na heard from his mind, causing the whiskered blonde to chuckle softly. "Of course you don't, Yoko-chan," he thought as he decided to check on who that other signature was. Unfortunately, he was interrupted by the Hyuga that got him into this situation in the first place. "You know what, that was evil of you, Hinata-chan," Na said, turning his head to look at the girl, noting her surprised look. "What did you do to our precious Bakugan?" she asked, looking straight into his eyes. A twisted smirk appeared on the annoyed blonde's face, his eyes shining brighter as they were activated. "I made them better by merging them with my own," he bluntly told her as the Hyuga growled and her veins bulged out as her own dojutsu was activated. How disrespectful. How dare you sully our eyes with yours," she yelled, clenching her fist in her unbridled anger. Her anger only fueled his enjoyment from the situation. "Come, Hinata-chan, let us continue where we left off last time. Just don't expect me to steal your panties this time," he said, dropping into a stance. "What panties?" the blue-haired genin brazenly admitted as she dropped into the gentle fist stance. The two stared at each other, the wind silently blowing their hair. At the same time, the two blushed. "Hentai," Hinata shrieked, feeling Naruto's gaze drop with his stolen yet modified eyes. She quickly dug into her pouch and threw a pair of kunai at the blonde's eyes, starting the fight. Na simply lowered his head, the kunai harmlessly flying over him as he dashed forward. He moved to strike her at her left shoulder with a quick strike. Hinata saw this and struck at his wrist, only for Naruto's entire body to be substituted with a log. Said log was bent and splintered from the strike before falling to the floor. Only a split second later, he reappeared behind her, swinging his leg into her hip. The Hyuga let out a quick gasp before her body was replaced by the same log as moments ago. The log was then broken in half from the force of the attack. Little shrapnel flying through the air. Na clenched his teeth at the short distance between them gave the Hyuga an upper hand. His eyes saw her focus the chakra in her palm, and he acted as quickly as he could. "Hake Kusho 8 trigrams air palm," she said, releasing the air from her palm that impacted Naruto's abdomen. Instead of seeing the blonde's body skidding across the clearing like she had wanted, she saw a hole where her attack hit, traces of smoke floating in the hole before it was quickly closed up. She gave another gasp as she was punched by the blonde before she was even finished with her gasp. It was Hinata that flew back across the clearing and Naruto landed on all fours, not unlike how a cat would. He looked at the Hyuga, his bangs shadowing his bangs as the girl recovered from the hit. Hinata growled a bit as she glared at the blonde, the veins around her eyes actually pulsing from the anger she was showing. "I'm tired of this," she said, running towards the blonde. Naruto pushed off the ground and did the same thing, meeting her in the middle. Again, they exchanged blows. Hinata's blows easily going through the blonde as he continued hitting the girl and watching her bounce back from his blows. "This girl is impressive, though it's getting late. Hurry up and end this fight so we can have our fun," Yoko said as the blonde mentally nodded and moved quickly. He swiped Hinata's next strike to his right while simultaneously sweeping her legs from under her. The Hyuga was surprised to find herself upside down, though she was even more surprised that she didn't feel any pain from falling on her head. She felt a sharp pain in her stomach and looked up to see both of Naruto's palms hitting her stomach. Time seemed to resume as she continued her spin while also being sent flying across the clearing once again, heading straight for the memorial stone. Hinata's Bakugan saw this, though she was a bit surprised to feel her body jerk to a quick stop and fall just in front of the stone. She went into a coughing fit and saw the blonde give a grin as he disappeared from her sight. She noticed the trace amounts of smoke before it became unnoticeable, even to her eyes. How's that possible? She muttered softly as she shakily got up. Nothing was broken or about to be broken, just a lot of bruising. She knew that if she was to raise her shirt, she'd see that her stomach was a light purple from the bruise. 2 weeks later, Na grumbled to himself as he stood in a small ravine picking up trash. These so-called team-building exercises were aching on his nerves. They were nothing but stupid chores the rest of the village was too lazy to do themselves. The D-rank list as a whole was pointless in that regard. Though during the past 2 weeks, he hasn't talked to Ino at all. He's seen her, but it was only from afar. After the first day, he couldn't stand to see her tears any longer and decided that she really needed her space. Plus, she was a liability when it came to Orochimaru. The Sonin would have no problem using her against him, and he didn't need her to be put in that kind of situation. He also knew he was supposed to be watching Sasuke's progress with his sharing, but it was pointless when they weren't even training properly. And don't even get him started on the training they were doing. It was nothing but go and work on what you need to work on, which was stupid because they weren't learning anything new. Though the time off did allow him to really train himself, often all night and well into the mornings. He hasn't had a better 2 weeks since coming to the village. Now that it was common knowledge among the Chunin, Jonin and Ambu about him training with Orochimaru, he was allowed to further his training the way he wanted to. He was given even more hated glares from the populace for that tidbit of information, but he paid it little mind. Also, he was glad to hear that Jera had left the village, so there were only a few people that could really take him down. He had to be wary of the Sandaime, Kakashi, Guy, and Danzo. They have yet to even get to the topic of chakra control exercises and nothing about taijutsu, something that their resident Pinky really needed help with. The blonde scoffed as he was forced to pick up a diaper. Really? Who the is this? He said just loud enough for the others to hear as he threw it in his bag. Watch your language, nah. Kakashi said from the top of the hill, his eyes on his book. You're entirely too young to be talking like that. The blonde growled and turned to the Jonin. Oh you Kakashi, how about you get us out of this trashy ravine and teach us something useful? Well, teach them something useful. Let me train by myself, he said as the man closed his book with a sigh. I for one agree with Blondie on this one. What does picking up trash have to do during a mission? This is pointless. I need to get stronger. What part of that don't you understand? The Uchiha said from his spot on the other side of the small ravine. I agree. I need to get stronger, too. I don't want to be the weakest link. Sakura said from her position a few yards away from the blonde. Na scoffed and looked over at her. Too late for that, he said as she lowered her head as the blonde turned back to Kakashi. Because we all know she's the weakest link. She may be the smartest girl in the class, but her academics mean in the real world. Teach her something already so that she can be proud of herself instead of being looked down on because she's a fangirl. Na glared at the Jonin, not really sure how it went to him being frustrated about not training to being frustrated to why his teammate wasn't training. It'd be a shame if she died like your friend did. Naruto muttered just loud enough for the man to hear. Kakashi's single-eyed widened at the shock of his words. It had seemed Orochimaru had told the blonde about Obito and how he was crushed by the boulder. His shock only lasted for a moment as he gave an eye smile at the blonde. Roger that Naruto-kun. Why don't you three finish this job and well go train and in a few days go on a mission? He said as the blonde narrowed his eyes at the man. You have got to be careful, Nukan. Why do you like provoking those stronger than you? The blonde heard the rumbling of Yoko's low growl. The blonde chuckled inwardly. Sorry, but I'm getting antsy. This is the year where everything is going to get crazy. He responded as he got back to work. I know, but you can't handle everything correctly if you end up dead before your time. Or worst, they find out about the plan, Yoko said with a bit of concern in her voice. You don't have to worry about that, Yoko-chan. They won't find out about the plan. With these new eyes, everything is becoming easier. I thought I was going to be able to watch Danzo more easily, but he has seals lining the top of his underground sanctuary. My Bakugan can't see through them. He must have pieced everything together about my new eyes. The blonde thought back as he stretched his back. Yeah, but he's always had the seals there. If he hadn't, the entire Hyuga clan would have found out about his base a long time ago. She informed as the blonde mentally nodded and sighed. The same goes for the contraption around his arm. You can easily see the sharing under his eye bandages through. So, there must be something special about his arm. She added as he mentally nodded again. I want to find out, but I don't want to find out the hard way. Na thought to himself with a chuckle. His chuckle died down when he noticed an Ambu member appear in front of Kakashi. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but they both turned to him. Naruto, you have a meeting to go to. Pack your well, just leave that here. The others can pick up your slack. I don't slack. The blonde grumbled as he dropped his bag and walked up to the Ambu member, noting their cat mask. What's the council want? He asked the woman. How do you? She asked softly, a bit surprised. Na gave the woman a simple look she seemed to understand. I don't know. My mission is to simply take you there, she said as the blonde looked at her. With the way she was talking to him, he had to wonder if she didn't care about his status as Orochimaru's student or the fact that he was Yoko's container. She could be useful if we find out her identity. An ally in someone that high up would really make things easier. She kind of seems familiar to me, like I felt her chakra before. Na shrugged as the woman laid her hand on his shoulder, and they body flickered out of sight. The two reappeared atop a roof a few hundred yards away. The blonde nodded to her and they set off towards the giant red building the Hoage's office resided in. Are you sure you don't know anything about what the council wants with me? The cat-masked Ambu member didn't spare the blonde a glance as she continued to hop from roof to roof. Well, I could be wrong, but I think it might be about a mission or something. They had this scroll sitting on the usually spotless desk when I was there, she said, not entirely sure she was telling him anything. The blonde smiled. Finally, I have a mission to do. I hope it's fun. The woman looked to the short blonde and gave him a look of worry. You should never take a mission lightly. No matter the rank or who trained you, missions should be handled with the utmost amount of seriousness. Leave the carefree attitude to when you're safely in the village, she said, surprising both the blonde and Yoko with how protective she got. They landed on the roof opposite of the Hokage building and the blonde crossed his arms as he looked at her with his light blue eyes. Tell me why you care so much about how I turn out during a mission. Don't you resent me for being the container of the Kaobi no Kitsun or because I was trained by an S-class criminal from this very village? He said, genuinely curious about what she was thinking. The woman put a finger to her masked chin in a very unambu-like gesture and hummed softly. Okay, I'll tell you. Only if you return safely from your mission without any injuries, she said before patting his head softly and vanishing from his sight. Naruto chuckled as he watched the woman leave. His eyes were activated as he kept his eye on her. Now I know where I sensed her chakra from. When we were in the woods, she was one of the Ambu that found you after you had your big going away fight. Yoko said as Naruto raised his eyebrow, keeping his eyes activated as he walked up to the building, scanning it from top to bottom. He sighed as certain areas of the building were covered from his eyes. He growled and pushed more chakra to his eyes, but only found the skeletal structures of the PEOPL. Inside. I guess that's good enough, the blonde thought as he deactivated his eyes and walked inside. Activity inside seemed to come to a halt as everyone noticed the bane of the village walking into the lobby. They looked at him, some sneering at him openly, others mumbling to their neighbor about why he was here. The new genin didn't pay them any mind, and simply walked by them, acting like they didn't exist. As he made his way up the steps before he could turn and make his way down the Hoage's office to keep up appearances and show he was behaving, a different Andu appeared in his path. Wrong way, brat, the man said in a gruff voice behind his wolf mask. You're going to see the council, not the Hokage, the man said with obvious malice in his tone. The blonde narrowed his eyes and gave the man a stern look, his pupils slitting despite not using any of Yoko's chakra. The man stared back into the blonde's eyes, a bit surprised at their sight. Na grinned as the man turned and began walking, his destination obviously the meeting room where the council was. The Anbu member opened the door and escorted the blonde inside. Honorable council, I've brought the gentry, the man said as they looked to see the entire civilian council in the along with Anko, who wasn't surprised to see Na there. Naruto, on the other hand, was surprised to see Anko there and voiced his surprise to her. Can it, brat? She said as someone from the council cleared his throat. Now that the brat is here and an official shinobi of the village, he can do missions. And we have the perfect mission for you, too. The elder of the village said, picking up the scroll that was on the desk and throwing it at Anko, who caught it easily. The details of your assignment are in there. Complete the mission and return to the village to resume your daily lives. He said as the other members of the council snickered, causing the special Jonan to roll her eyes and the blonde to raise his brow. Oh. And another thing, Genshiriki, break a leg out there. One of the women said. The blonde recognized her as one of the most successful women in the civilian world. She owned most of the food stands and ran the one of the most important trading goods company, so it was obvious to say she was a very arrogant woman. Na nodded, knowing full well she really wanted him to break his leg, and he smiled brightly at her just to piss her off. Okay, thank you, Madam Councilwoman. I will, he said before he heard Anko, telling him to hurry up. He stepped outside of the office room and yawned, his face changing emotions to that of boredom. So, do they always give you suicide missions? He asked, turning to her to see her nod after a brief moment of surprise. You shouldn't be surprised. Orochimaru kept tabs on you despite you leaving him. I knew as soon as I stepped in the village that you were having problems with the civilian council. Everything they do is under the Hoage's nose and he's probably turning a blind eye on purpose. Enko shrugged her shoulders and continued walking until they were in the lobby where the whispers grew more hushed and the amount of hate filled the air even faster than before. Look, kid, I don't care what they have me do. As long as I'm getting paid, I'll do the mission. They aren't even that hard to me. So, just stay out of my way and you won't die on this mission, she said with a hint of fire in her voice as she walked out the door. That was feisty, Yoko said with a giggle. This is going to be an interesting mission. Don't you think so, Narukan? Na stretched his arms and followed the snake mistress to the roof of the opposite building. Oh. Yeah, of course. It'll be a relief to finally be getting a mission, even if it isn't with my supposed team. He replied to the red-headed demonist as he looked at Anko. So, Anko-chan, what's the mission? The woman resisted the urge to stab the young boy and opened the scroll. After reading it, she tossed it over to the blonde. Find out yourself, she simply said before jumping towards the north gate. Na caught the scroll and looked it over. All right, it seems this is a two-part mission. Assassinate the son of the old daimyo of the Earth Country before he becomes of legal age. Na read more of the scroll and found out the second part was to also make it look like one of the guards did it. Also, it clearly stated on the scroll, if caught, their ranks and citizenship in the village of Konoha would be terminated and they will be marked as missing nin effective immediately. Seems easy enough, the blonde muttered as he pocketed the scroll and headed to the north gate. 30 minutes later, the two snake users set off from the north gate, the destination, Suchi-Nuni. It took them a while to prepare for a long trip because the trip to the Earth capital alone was going to take a while. Na turned to look over at the trench coat-wearing woman to see that her brows were together in deep thought. Hey Anko-chan, what are you thinking about? He asked, trying to strike up some type of conversation to pass the time. Also, because she was the only other person in the entire village that grew up with similar conditions to his, except he was forced to become Orochimaru's student where she volunteered. What I'm thinking about, you have no business in. Just stay out of my personal life and go back to Orochimaru, you bastard. She sneered at him and sped up her speed a bit. Naruto kept up with her without problems. But if we don't form some type of bond, then we're going to die on this mission. And I don't want you to die, the blonde said as Anko sneered at him with more intensity. Well, that's too bad for you because I want you to die. It doesn't matter by whose hand there's a mine. You're going to die, you and that wretched master of yours, she said, whipping her head back forward. Why would you want to kill Yoko-chan? He asked, hanging back a bit. Enko stopped on the next tree branch, using her chakra so she didn't slip and land on her. She turned around to him, the blonde only catching a glimpse of how her swung and jiggled with the swing. Who the hell is Yoko? She asked with a tone louder than how she was talking before. The blonde landed on the branch before hers and did the same with his chakra. His light blue eyes looked into her pupil's brown eyes. The sight of those eyes reminded him of Ino's own pupil-less eyes. Yoko is the name of the Keiabe no Kitsun. Naruto simply stated, a bit surprised he wasn't hearing anything from the demonist. Now Ango was a bit surprised to hear that and crossed her arms under her. Are you telling me you don't serve Orochimaru? She asked bluntly. The blonde smirked as he jumped onto the branch she was on. Who says I ever did? He muttered high enough for her to hear before he jumped off again. Anko stayed in her spot for a few more seconds, chuckling softly and shaking her head. I guess he's playing everyone in this village, she muttered before hopping forward, following the blonde. L and F, L and F, L and F. The two snake users had been traveling for about 5 full hours before Anko called for a break. Look, kid, we all can't have an endless supply of stamina. I'm tired and hungry, so go and hunt us some food, fox boy, the trenchcoat-clad woman said before plopping her butt down on a tree stump and crossed one of her legs over the other. The blonde gave the woman a look, his face blank as he stared at her. I didn't stutter. Go and catch us a deer or something. I'm in the mood for some meat, she said, winking at the boy, finally relaxing around him a bit. She had planned on being a hard for the entire mission, but seeing as how he was using Orochimaru, he couldn't be so bad. She still wanted to beat him up, though. Na grumbled to himself as he turned on a dime and stomped off into the surrounding forest. Who does she think she is, ordering me around like that? He said as he dashed forward and up into the branches. I say you teach her who's in control between the two of you. I know for a fact you won't have a problem making her obey your every word. Yoko said as the blonde stopped and shook his head. I don't want her to obey me. I like how she is right now. He stopped and spotted one of those small young deers. The fawn was separated from its mother. Though from what the blonde could see with his modified Bakugan, a large buck wasn't that far away from it. He watched carefully, wondering if this was some sort of trap designed to take down the unsuspecting predator. That's what it looks like to me, though. That animal has no chance taking down a shinobi. Yoko told him as the blonde chuckled softly. I would hope not, he joked as he brought up his chakra bow. An arrow around notched in place and aimed at the buck. He noticed that the power output would literally make the buck's head explode. He took a deep breath and felt most of the chakra returning to him. What was left of the arrow was a thin, really minuscule line of blue chakra. It was the thinnest the blonde could make it, and it was effectively the most dangerous. Even with him being as close as he was to it, he could barely sense anything from it. And he knew the only thing that could have been sensed was the bow itself, since he only lowered the chakra output on the R. Ow. If he was to get a normal compact bow and used these arrows, then he would literally be the best assassin. After another 10 seconds of watching, he let the arrow fly through the air. He grinned as the arrow pierced the side of the buck's head and burst out the other side and into the ground. There was a thin spray of blood as the animal let out a surprised grunt before dropping to the floor. He let out a small sigh as he held the breath he seemed to be holding as the bow vanished from sight. He deactivated his eyes and grinned as he dropped down and walked to the dead buck. The fawn saw him and ran the other way. Obviously scared, he scratched his head and watched the fawn leave the area, his senses picking up someone before they ran away as well. He shrugged his shoulders and walked up to the buck and grabbed it by the antlers and started dragging it towards where he left Anko. She better be in the mood for deer because I'm not dragging another animal for a long time, he muttered to himself, the stink already filling his nostrils. L and F, L and F, L and F. The blonde rested on his back. The grown deer had been skinned and it has been cooking for the past 10 minutes. Sure do wish this damn thing would hurry up. I'm starving, Anko exclaimed in impatience. The blonde sighed, never knowing the girl was this annoying when she was hungry. Anko, please. It's only been a few minutes. Give it more time. Something that big needs at least 40 more minutes. Not to mention, we didn't even build a rotisserie to put the damn thing on. Na explained as he looked over at the woman who huffed and crossed and uncrossed her legs in impatience. Na shook his head, able to clearly see the colored panties she had on underneath her skirt. That's entirely too long. Go and find a small rabbit for an appetizer, she said, really wanting some dango to eat. Na let out a cold laugh. Hell, the Na, I'm going to sit here and waste the day away while this damn thing cooks. If you don't like that, then tough titty, the blonde said, looking up at the canopy above before his danger senses went off. He vanished from his spot just in time to avoid the cane thrown by annoyed Anko. Oi. Watch where you're throwing those. You could put someone's eye out. Anko smirked and pulled out another cane and held it up to her eye, aiming at the blonde. That was the plan. Now stand still, she yelled, throwing the cane again, causing the blonde to run around comically as he avoided her can. Y. Lane, L and F, L and F. In the trees, quite a distance away from the duo, 5 missing nin from Iowa watched the group, only catching glimpses from their individual perches. It was clear to see that they were missing nins by the scratches adorning their headbands. One of them had been hunting at the same time the blonde was and had witnessed him killing the deer with his strange chakra bow. Naturally, the hunter had to go back to the main group to tell them about the bigger catch he had found. He had recognized the boy, seeing as how he looked exactly like Manado, the Yandami of Hokage. At first, the others had disagreed, but when they thought of the fame and admiration they would get from Iowa, they saw Naruto as their chance to get back into the good graces of the Sandames. So, here they were watching the boy run around while his partner threw kanai at him. Are you positive this could be that bastard's son? He doesn't look like much to me, the leader of the band of group of missing ninjas said with a groan of disappointment as he watched. Are you sure about that? Because I can only see their resemblance in their matching hair. The boy's eyes are far too light. He looks like he could be a crossbreed from their village's Haugen. A young man said, squinting his eyes a bit as he tried to get a better look. Why don't we just go and ask him? The only female of the group suggested while everyone looked at her like she was stupid, which from their experience, she kind of was. That's the stupidest idea you've ever suggested. I swear if it wasn't for the fact that you have big cans, I'd kill you. The leader said, clearly annoyed as he rubbed the bridge of his nose while everyone else groaned. The woman ignored the threatening insult and waved her hands wildly. No, no, no. Hear me out. If he says that he is the Yandi Hoage's son, we capture him and take him to Sandame Sama. If he isn't, we kill him and pillage their corpses. She said as the others looked at her in surprise. They gave a quick vote and they all slapped her shoulders, making her giggle in their form of praise. It's settled, we'll surprise them and kill the quickly. The leader commanded as they started moving closer. It had seemed obvious to them that Enko was the teacher, instructing the blonde about the real world. How wrong were they? L and F, L and F, L and F. Naruto continued running around the clearing, even hiding behind the deer, only for Anko to throw the kanai into the cooking meat. Anko, you're going to be eating metal if you keep throwing things over here. Na yelled before she sent a snake at him. The reptile slithering quickly before it jumped at the blonde fangs first. Na grinned and body flickered out of the way just as the group of Iwan nins dropped into the clearing behind Anko. The two planned their counterattack well because Anko also vanished, but it wasn't from a body flicker because the snake from before quickly replaced her position. The snake quickly latched onto the neck of the only woman, sinking its poisonous venom into nervous system. The rest of the group exclaimed in surprise just as Na appeared inside of the group. The two in the back showed the most surprise as the blonde unsheathed his 2 blades and began spinning simultaneously. 3 out of the 4 were killed by the slice to their necks. The 4th was quick enough to only receive a thin cut on his neck as he jumped away from the murderous blonde. Holy, just who the hell are you, brat? I'm sure you already know that, Mr. Iwa Nin. Na grinned at the man holding up his ivory blade and licked the blood from the steel. I go by Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. It's a shame I can't allow you to live now. Anko, handle the man, he said, causing a tick mark to appear on her head. Don't try to boss me around. She yelled while the man ran away into the trees. Na threw his hands into the air at her behavior. Damn woman, could you be any more childish right now? Yes, I can, she yelled loudly before sitting on the ground and sticking her tongue out at him. The blonde's eye twitched before he released a sigh. Whatever, he muttered before vanishing to go chase the bleeding man down. After a few seconds, possibly 30, the blonde returned causally swinging the blood from his weapons before she them behind him. Well, you're on first watch duty. Anko scoffed and crossed her arms under her. Oh, please, you're not the boss of me. She was joking around, trying to find what made the blonde tick. This was the longest she's ever spent around him. The blonde gave her a blank look and sat across from her. You're going to get us caught and branded as missing nins, he said, making the purple-haired woman laugh loudly. Cool down, brat. I'm just playing around. The mission is nowhere near being started. So, until we actually cross the border, we should enjoy our time together. Kick back. This mission could go for as long as 2 months. That's when the kid's birthday starts and he technically becomes the new daimyo for Earth Country. Na let out a groan and leaned onto his back, covering his eyes with his hands. You can't learn more about Danzo from outside the village. Though, if you're lucky, one of his root agents will make themselves known to both you and Anko. So, you could interrogate one of them. Yeah, that'd be great. The more I know about his agents, mentally, the more I know how to get to him, unless they're like unbelievably loyal to the old man. He replied back to her before a rock landed on his stomach. He sat up and gave Anko a blank look. What, Anko? She smirked and leaned forward a bit. There you go. I thought you were giving me the silent treatment. I was saying you don't have anything important waiting in the village. Do you? I heard about you and your little girlfriend splitting up from Ka, she said before trailing off as Naruto narrowed his eyes at her. Who was that? Were you about to say Kade-chan? He said, cupping his ear. To better hear her words for her benefit, of course. You were, weren't you? We aren't even split up. We're just taking a break after I told her about Yoko. Enko nodded, seeing that was one of the reasons that could have ended their relationship. Well, you should break all the way up. Even if you don't serve Orochimaru, he'd still use her to get to you. And you and I both know he'd do it. He'd do it with a sadistic grin on his face. Naruto shook his head. I'm not going to give up on Ino. I'll just give her this space so she can sort through her thoughts. I'll only give up on her when she gives up on me. I know deep down that this experience will make us stronger as a couple, Na said, causing Anko to scoff. For someone so young, you're saying some grown-up, stay your age. Enjoy your childhood despite it already being taken from you by Orochimaru. Enko spoke as she looked over at the roasting deer. More importantly, the kunai stuck inside of its side. One of us is going to have to get that. Naruto shrugged. I'm not going to do it now. Well, I guess you are right, Anko-san. This is going to be a long mission, and it's best not to rush anything. He said, lying back on the ground. The purple-haired special Jonin grinned widely. Now you're getting it. Remember, this is a mission given to us by the Civilian Council. So, I like to spend as much time out in the field just to piss 'em off. She said, doing the same. Na chuckled and closed his eyes and took a few deep, relaxing breaths. I haven't been this relaxed at all in my young life. He muttered to himself, though Enko was still able to hear what said. However, she stayed silent as the blonde had seemingly drifted off into dreamland. The snake mistress sat up and looked over at him and smiled softly before taking out a kunai and throwing it beside his head. Naruto lay unmoving as he continued to sleep. She chuckled before lying back and closing her own eyes and falling asleep herself. So guys, what do you think about this Naruto story? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want more Naruto what if stories, make sure to subscribe to Universe of Naruto. Thanks for